If you can't get on Zoom with your Android, go down to the audio options and then click on join with phone. And what it'll do is it will sync with your phone. At least it should. Can someone message that to Verna? So we're gonna go ahead and start here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather McMeekin. I'm the president of the Democratic Women of McDonough County. Welcome to our Racial Justice Coalition's press conference on behalf of Megan and Corey Kelly. Megan and Corey Kelly live in McDonough County. Corey Kelly is a two-time decorated war veteran. Megan Kelly is his wife. She is a state worker. And on Corey's birthday, well, first I'll start off with a content warning. The evidence and the discussion that we're about to ensue is likely to trigger historical and interpersonal racial trauma. It is likely to be very upsetting for especially for our Black community member and other people of color, and those who have had issues with policing, issues with being incarcerated, issues of being unlawfully detained. We would ask that if you find things too problematic, it's a lot. What we're going to go through is a lot of evidence, and a lot of it is very disturbing. So I hope that you'll reach out to us, let us know if there's any way we can support you. Feel free to send me a private message or send Sam a private message through the chat. And so here we go. So this case is actually about sorry, I have an anxious dog at my feet. Joey, you're going to have to be okay with this. My apologies. He has a beeping issue. Can't be on top of me. I warned you he was going to do this. He just does that whenever there's that beep. Okay, so starting from the beginning. Megan, would you like to begin with just how you were going about your day, and then we'll just kind of stop it there up until we have the evidence of the police. So what we don't have is the beginning of this, where you were out near Walmart and just doing your shopping for Corey's birthday.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't doing any shopping for Corey's birthday. We were at his job and it was time for him to get off. And so we were actually in the process of going home. It was just his birthday. That day I had been at home and I had been, cooking and getting the house together for his day. However, I did all of that in advance to where I did not have to worry about errands that day. So that day consisted of just Corey and I coming home from work. So Corey got off of work and we proceeded to go home. And so that's kind of where it begins. It's really nothing to it when it comes to the beginning of it. So again, it was just a matter of work and him getting off of work and me being there for him and us proceeding to go home.
At what point did you perceive that the police were watching you?
It would have been the very first time we initially attempted to go home.
Okay, and where were you at when that happened?
And we were at that four-way stop. It's not a four-way stop, but it's a four-way intersection, yeah. And it's about right there at the stoplight that sits by Walmart and Burger King.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be Jefferson and Walton Way.
We're not leaving until 12:45, 30 minutes.
Hey, Elaine, I'm going to have you mute yourself if you wouldn't mind. Just because it's kicking in here. Oh, let me see if I can do that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so all right. So at that point, is that where the video picks up in the car video, Sam? Right after?
No, because Megan said they went back to go get something from Corey's work.
Okay, Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about that? So you went back to Corey's work and what happened?
Yeah, so we initially noticed three cop cars. There was a truck and a SUV and a car. And we initially first noticed that when we were proceeding to go home. So my husband realized that he forgot something at work, and we turned around. And when we turned around the first time, turning around to go to his job, that's when we saw them again a second time. So we did notice them pass us again a second time, and it was pretty strange to us because, again, when we first noticed them, we were on opposite sides of one another of traffic. So my husband and I was going towards McDonald's coming from Pella Way, and they were at that stoplight by the Walmart and Burger King going towards Pella. So that was the very first time that we encountered all three cops. From there, we turned around at the Pizza Hut area, realizing that we needed to go back to my husband's job. So when we turned around, we noticed three of them again, and they were headed back to towards our direction as we were headed back towards their direction. So to us, it was quite strange that we had just saw them at a stoplight proceeding to keep forward past us. And, within a matter of 30 seconds of turning around, they were all three of them were headed back towards our direction. So it was just strange to us to have seen that. So that would have been the second time we noticed them. And then once leaving my husband's job again for the second time, we noticed them again for the third time.
Okay.
So we noticed them on three different occasions within 5 minutes of all of this happening. So within the 5 minutes that it took my husband and I to turn around and retrieve what he needed to retrieve and then head back out, we had seen them a total of 3 times.
Okay, and this was 3 Macomb police officers, 3 separate vehicles from Macomb PD, is that correct?
It was actually 2 Macomb police officers and 1 sheriff's.
Okay.
Was the truck the sheriff?
Yeah, the truck was the
So
sheriff's.
yeah, I'm sorry. The truck, it's a Dodge Ram blue truck. We see it often, and it has sheriff plates, I believe, in the front of it. So that was the truck that we saw, and then it was a SUV Macomb police SUV vehicle, and then it was just a regular Macomb police car.
Okay. So now we're going to pick it up where we have some evidence to go over. So Sam, you want to take it from here?
Yep.
Thank you.
Just a sec here. Let me screen
Megan,
share.
if you want to, or Corey, if you want to interject, just feel free to just interject and we'll pause it.
Okay.
All right. Can everybody see the screen?
Yep, I can see it.
All right. So I just wanted to start off with a content warning. Racial profiling, racism, stalking, harassment, assault, false arrest, unlawful detainment, illegal search and seizure of property, and human rights violations. Some of this footage might not be suitable for all audiences, particularly individuals with PTSD, anxiety, or racial trauma. So you should take caution when watching any of the video. And if you do need to reach out to support, please reach out to one of us in the chat, or you're welcome to send us an email later. So just a sec here. All right, so the exterior squad car cam begins recording, and this is just him turning around at some point and starting to drive down Jefferson. And then, let me just a second here.
Okay, so this is shortly after 3 o'clock, after the shift at NTN Bauer has gotten out.
And this is the intersection that Megan was mentioning.
In there, yep.
Yep, that's their car, and that's Walton Way and Jefferson. And this is where they would have seen the officer for the third time. Is that correct, Megan?
That is correct, Sam. That would have been the third time, yeah, that we saw the officers.
And at this point, there were no obvious civil or traffic violations that were obvious.
No, we weren't doing anything wrong. We had our seatbelts on. We used our turning signals anytime we needed to, you know, go from one lane to another lane or make a turn. There was no type of traffic violations that we were violating.
And the officers' reports confirm that they had no concerns about your driving at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Right? And then after that, you will see, so this is the intersection. You can see their car, and you will see the officer make a U-turn on this very busy highway. Here, well, road.
Across 4 lanes of traffic.
Across 4 lanes of traffic. And then that takes us to our next
And
slide.
again, they have not done anything wrong to justify.
They've done nothing wrong. And this officer at this point in time does not have his lights or sirens on and proceeds to run a red light. And it appears he may have slowed down a little bit, but had he been any faster, he could have flipped any of those vehicles.
Yeah.
And this is where his audio turns on.
And his lights and sirens are not on here, correct?
And you can hear his music starting to play.
So he turns on this music while he's chasing them, even though they've done nothing wrong.
Turned it to the next. Yep.
He's following.
So he turns on his hype music, unsilences his radio, and
Can you
yeah,
pause it there for a second?
Pause right here.
Yep. All right. So we want to explain a little bit about what that is. We refer to hype music as, that's sort of a term that you see in MMA fighting or sports where people will play music to amp themselves up. I will just tell you as an EMS instructor who taught people how to, be safe, that there is no excuse for turning on music while you are, that's a distraction for one, right? It's unsafe. 2, when you're about to go into a situation, you want all of your faculties with you. You do not want to be so much into your sort of emotional, adrenalized mindset that you either miss details or you escalate. But this is an escalation for himself. And it's very odd that we would see an officer choose to do this because, you would be advised in training never to do anything that distracts you, never to take action that further adrenalizes you because it's already pumping. But again, remember, they have done nothing wrong. He has just decided to pursue them for some reason. What could that be? Okay, go ahead, Sam.
I think I might have had the time off on this slide.
It's okay. So he's through the red light there, goes around this vehicle. His lights and sirens are still not on. Not properly warning people that he is driving this fast and unsafely.
Yeah. So Corey turns left onto a side road. I'm not quite sure what the name of that road is, but it's over by the old Kmart and the movie theater.
And to
off
be
of
clear,
Jefferson.
that's not a road, right? That is actually part of a private lot of it serves as a plaza. And although there are stop signs at the edges of the plaza that the owner of that property has installed because it's good business practices, it limits liability. Those are not municipal traffic control devices on that lot. Those are private stop signs for which nobody is obligated to stop. They just kind of hope you will because it's just wise to at least pause. So go ahead, Sam.
All right. So Mr. Kelly takes a left into that private area. And you will see that the officer actually follows after them, obviously speeding up.
Mm-hmm. Still
And
no.
then the music gets very loud.
So this is a private lot. They are under no obligation to stop at this upcoming stop sign.
And we'll get that on the next slide.
Yeah.
There.
Hey, Sam, real quick, the audio is hard. Can we talk about the music makes getting the transcript for the audio very difficult, but we
Oh,
do,
incredibly so.
right. But we do have the audio between the officers and what they were saying, which we'll deal with that down the road. But just know that there was communication going on between those officers.
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
we'll address that here in just a moment.
You're right, it is Jackson Street, not Jefferson. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I said Jefferson too earlier.
Oh, okay. I had the street name on there. My bad. All right. So this is the stop sign.
And again, that's not a municipal
I
stop
would say they yielded at.
sign, because it's just a driveway. Under no obligation to stop there.
And so this, the officer turns to follow.
Now this is back behind Kmart, and they're pulling in right into Kmart, which is safer for everybody involved because then they're off the street and there's less likely to be problematic traffic. And that was a good decision made by Corey there to do that. And again, they've not broken any laws.
Yep, and we are unsure if there was any sirens used at all because it was inaudible, and you can also, well, it's also very difficult to hear any radio.
And also, I just want to add that just to kind of verify things for you guys, to kind of clear things up, there was no sirens
Okay.
when we were being pulled over. There was just lights that flashed behind us.
Which, if you're violating traffic laws as a law enforcement officer or any emergency personnel, you do not have the right to make the public unsafe. And you should be using lights with sirens. That is standard best practices. Go ahead, Sam.
Yep. Second. And this is the officer's initial reaction and approach to the vehicle.
Hey guys, how y'all doing? We'll start pulling us over for no apparent reason. My husband and I
Go up to Megan.
going to see
Right.
limit. Let me make sure I go. What's up, man? Hey, the reason I'm stopping you, not a big deal, my man. Just a couple small things, okay? The only way you can have nothing hanging off the rear view, okay? Not a big deal. And then that stop again. Not a big deal. Just had to take that off. Then you did not have a complete stop that stop sign back there, buddy. Not a big deal. I'm gonna write you a ticket, okay?
Can you pause it, Sam?
Yep, that's what I did. So just note there that this officer says that he is not going to write them a ticket and that it is not a big deal.
Because,
And it is at the 3-minute mark.
and again, they've done nothing wrong, so the officer knows he has nothing he can write them a ticket for. This is a stop that shouldn't have happened. And then why did he approach the passenger side of the vehicle? And Megan realized, she exited and started recording because this is an illegal stop. It's not an appropriate stop. So go ahead.
Y'all stay in Macomb?
All right, so right there, we will just say that this is a complaint that we get a lot, is that the officers treat even our Black community members or people who work here in Macomb, but maybe live out in the country, as if they don't belong here. When they're pulled up on, they are asked that. And I'll admit, when I've been pulled over, I've never been asked where I'm from. So go ahead, Sam.
All right.
Hey, do you have your driver's license on you?
Stop sign. Stop at the stop sign all the way. He just wants to pull you over. So we know we stopped at the stop sign, so we're not going to give up any information right now. So yeah, so we're not going to.
You just got your ID, buddy. She's gonna do nothing but get you in trouble right now.
No, it's not.
I didn't know if you wanted to add a comment there.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam, on that one.
That is incredibly misogynistic. For an officer to say, your wife is going to get you in trouble
Yeah,
when she was just in fear. And Megan, if you have anything you would like to add.
Yeah, it was very disturbing that day. Not only was I in an immense amount of fear, an extreme amount. I also, they were trying to use a tactic to pin me and my husband against one another as though it was our fault that we were in this situation.
right.
So it was very disturbing the way that these civil servants handled the entire situation, including the lieutenant, dispatch, and the entire entity of law enforcement. It was extremely disturbing. Just the things that was said out of this individual's mouth was concerning to me. The way that we were treated, and so yeah, that's pretty, yeah.
And we have all these officers here for a non-crime. And I will say that the law does allow police officers to detain somebody for a short time at scene to ask for an ID and give them a reasonable amount of time to produce an ID. It can never be used constitutionally as a pretext to deprive them of their freedom, to detain them for longer than a short period of time, to take them to jail, to arrest them. Those are not allowed. Now, at this point, they have all these officers around them. They have committed no crime. Corey's just getting off of work. They're just trying to go about their day. They took the way home that they normally take, but they were followed, and then they were just accused of a non-crime. And we don't know if that officer just is poorly trained and doesn't understand that that's not a municipal stop sign and that there is a difference. So therefore, he is actively violating their rights as they are detained here and pulled over. They should have been allowed to proceed home without incident. Okay, so go ahead.
Yep. Give me just a sec. I gotta get to where I was.
Another thing that I would like to add is that, the second time that my husband and I noticed that we were being stalked and harassed and hunted, when we realized that was going on, my husband and I, we did not feel safe. We felt as though we were being racially profiled. We felt as though that they, were intentionally conspiring against us. And we do know that this is illegal for any type of law enforcement or government entity to conspire against another person. It's illegal for anyone to conspire against anyone. And so by this time, my husband and I were underneath the impression that we were being racially profiled and that they were conspiring against us.
And the conversation that we have that we'll play later shows that, yes, they were indeed trying to find a reason to pull you over. That is by itself the pretext for this stop, which makes it racial profiling. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sam.
Stop at the stop sign sign all the way. He just wants to pull you over. So we know we stopped at the stop sign, so we're not going to give up any information right now. So yeah, so we're not going to.
You just gotta try to do that.
But we did
She's gonna do nothing but get you in trouble right now.
No, it's not going to get us in trouble. I'll go ahead and call the supervisor and have them meet us here. Because we know we made a complete stop. We saw you guys, we saw you, and we saw the other guy pass us. So we know you're intentionally fucking with us. And then you asked us, do we live in Macomb because you want to know information about us. So I will go ahead and call your supervisor and have them meet us here because we stopped at that stop sign.
You did.
We did.
You did.
We did. And I'm not going to argue with you. Honey, don't give anything. I'm going to call the supervisor.
Go ahead and stop that, Sam. I will just say, as an former EMS and first aid instructor at a university, we teach women when they feel unsafe in interactions with the police. We've been teaching them for over 35 years to call for a supervisor, because we know that there are people who fake being police officers, right, and put those blue lights and then try to pull over. But and normally that should not be a problem, except here in Macomb, as it turns out, the police don't like it when Black women in particular call. And we know that because there have been several Black women that have been treated this way for what's about to come next. And I'm going to give a content warning because it is perfectly legal to call 911 when you are in fear. It is perfectly legal to call 911 when you have concerns about the way that paid public servants are behaving on their jobs, especially if you perceive that they are making you unsafe. And actually, that's a responsible thing to do. Why? Because normally it de-escalates the situation. Now, the way that procedure is supposed to work for police officers, as soon as Megan told him, I'm going to call your supervisor, we have a problem with this, that interaction should have stopped right there. He should have stopped and said, okay, I will go back to my vehicle and I shall wait until my supervisor gets here. That's what should have happened. Go ahead, Sam.
All right.
Don't say anything and don't answer questions.
I'm not.
Don't answer questions for you.
And again, they've done nothing wrong. They're under no obligation to answer questions.
All right, guys, give me a couple minutes. You're being detained, 110%. Thank you.
Okay, right there's a
So,
constitutional law violation, illegally detaining them.
So Heather, I do want to make a point.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go right ahead.
But no, I pointed out the 3-minute timestamp on where we were 3 minutes into this video, and he said, it's not a big deal. You're not getting a ticket. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so a minute and a half later, this man tells them that they are being detained. They're calling 911 in fear of their lives.
And right there, that is a constitutional, that is violating their constitutional rights. Now, it is legal for them to say, please wait, just, we'll give you time to get your ID and then we can let it go on. But they didn't do that. He didn't do that, no. Megan was under no obligation to either identify herself, produce any other ID. And the other thing here is the police obviously didn't see anything in the vehicle. So you cannot just illegally detain somebody and go on a fishing expedition hoping to find something. So they have no reason to have been pulled over. There was no reason for them to have been detained. There was no reason for Megan to have been asked for her ID. And so let's continue. Go ahead, Sam.
All right, and this is the 911 call. There's 2 sections because she was transferred to a different operator during this call. So this is the first half.
Done anything wrong, so unless we're being detained. Hello. Unless we're being detained. Hello. Then unless we're being detained. Yes, I need a supervisor here right now outside of Kmart. I have a cop car, license plate MC-17. Okay, what's going on? Okay. I need a supervisor here right now. What's the problem? We are being pulled over for illegal, supposedly not stopping at a stop sign, and we didn't stop at a stop sign. We know that we have not committed a crime, and he is insisting on producing incriminating information. So
Can you hold on just a minute? Hold on just a minute, please.
All right, and then the second half.
Okay.
Okay, what's your name?
Again, I'm not giving up any information. I just need a supervisor here.
Okay, well, I know the officers pulled you over, and I need to know your name. So he's gonna run it anyway.
My first name is Megan. Again, I'm requesting a supervisor.
Is it Megan Kelly?
I'm requesting a supervisor.
There's one on the way. I'm just verifying this is Megan Kelly.
I like Sienna said, I'm not giving up any incriminating information. I'm requesting a supervisor.
Sam.
Well, your name is not incriminating, and
It is not on a 911 operator to argue with a community member calling for a supervisor. They do not have to give their second name if they do not wish to. Again, Megan has committed no crime. She's being illegally detained. And you can hear the fear and anxiety in her voice there. At that point, if a well-trained emergency services provider would have recognized the signs of early adrenalized anxiety there. And at that point, that dispatcher should have begun trying to de-escalate her fear. But instead, we have this. Go ahead, Sam.
I have that you're in 2008 red Chevrolet with a license plate V128769. Is that correct?
Supervisor on the way.
Yes, he's on the way. He's on the way. My name is Teresa. I'm a dispatcher.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. So now Megan has asked for a supervisor, as I would if I felt like I was being illegally detained and my rights were being violated. And that is an attempt at self-protection. And that is something that we teach women to do, to trust the police, to call 911 if you think something's not right. And that is what she has done. And despite being illegally detained and right now having her constitutional rights violated and being in fear, she is still trying to articulate her concerns appropriately. Although
That is correct. That is correct. And as you can see, even during that 911 call to dispatch, she was clearly infringing on my rights. No one who calls 911 is required to provide any information. 911 is used for those purposes, for emergency purposes. And if we feel that there's an emergency, we can call. We are not obligated to disclose or provide any information. However, it is helpful.
And it's understandable at this point, I'll just say why Megan would be fearful giving more information in this point, because already her rights and her husband's have been violated. And the officer appears to have tried to, gaslight her husband into getting mad at her for trying to adhere and demand that their rights be upheld and that the stop go properly. And we as white people have, we can't understand really what it feels like for Black folks who get pulled over. But remember, we're dealing with a situation where historically, Black people in McDonough County who have been pulled over have been subjected to far worse rights violations, in problems that white people generally have not had. And this particular officer, just so you know, we have multiple complaints about him doing similar. So, okay, Sam, where are we at next on this?
All right. So next, we go back to the dash cam footage, and this is where the officer has returned to his squad car and he's radioing in. I'm just gonna turn the volume down a little bit because it can be a little loud.
Okay.
And this is where Megan is on the phone as well with 911.
And again, they've committed no crime. They're being detained. The officer has told them they're being detained. Just a minute, whatever, after telling him they're not even gonna get a ticket, because of course he had nothing he could ticket them for.
I'm just gonna leave it on mute for that because he doesn't say anything of any significance in this section. But if Megan would like to add anything here, or Corey.
I really have nothing more to add other than the clear conversation with the dispatch, how I was not even able to get any assistance. Even the first initial time calling to request for a supervisor, she sat there on the phone and argued with me, and I was clearly in distress. So this is just all problematic. You know, this is, we pay as well. Black people are a major part of taxpayer money. And this is our funds and our hard-earned money that's being put into these entities and organizations, and they do not protect us. And so, yeah, for me to call dispatch there and to feel as though she was being aggressive and hostile and she was being demanding and argumentative, that is very problematic.
And you see here that Megan and Corey are you know, they're being peaceful in their body language, although understandably stuck because they're being illegally detained, but trying to work it out on the phone, trying to, you know, support each other. You know, they're not a threat. Go ahead, Sam, on our next slide here.
All right. It's not. Okay, there we go. So I'm assuming it was Detective Wright, because that's the name I heard in the dialogue. So at this point in time, Megan and Corey are standing next to their vehicle, and Officer Steger decides to call another officer to ask some questions to try to dig for information on Megan and Corey.
And again,
So
they're illegally detained and have committed no crime. So go ahead, Sam.
Hey, what's up? Hey, question, bud. Yeah. It looks like 7/22 of 20. You returned some property to a Corey Kelly on 530 West Carroll Street. Does that ring a bell? 530 West Carroll. What was it? It doesn't say. He's a lighter skinned black guy. His wife is all. I've been stopped by a civil servant. We don't need to give up any information. Does any of that ring a bell?
would you like to add anything?
No, go ahead and let this one play a bit.
Okay.
People need to hear that.
Not really, no. Actually, it's a property recovered, so you must have retrieved one. Good. That name doesn't ring a bell. Got that to report on it? Well, there's a speak to officer right after or before that. I'm not sure. But they came in to see you. Sorry. I have some wannabe. You what? I have some wannabe. What do you call them? Sovereign citizen. What's that right now? Enterprise found ammunition. Was it like ammunition for destruction? Looks like it was ammunition left in a rental car, maybe. I don't remember that, man. I'll be honest with you. Yeah. I wonder if I got sent
get like JP or something handle that. That shit happens all the time too.
Yeah. All right, roll's pulling up, so we gotta figure this out. Thanks.
All right, sorry.
You go ahead and pause that, Sam. So they're referencing a rental car that they had rented, and they had left some of their legal ammunition in. They are law-abiding citizens, both FOID card owners. They live out in the country, and like most of our people who live out in the country around here, they are gun owners. And so they had left some of that in the vehicle when they returned it. But it was no big deal. And you can hear right there, the guy said, yeah, that happens all the time. It literally happens all the time around here. It's that stuff is not anything different or unusual. So, okay, Sam, next slide, or whichever we're going to next.
All right. Give me just a second here. And then this is when the supervisor is at scene.
And we do think the spelling on that should be ROWLAND.
They're acting very sovereignty, and
I'm going to turn it all up.
and they won't be themselves. If they're both the registered owners of the car, neither of them want them. I have to drag you there one way or another, but she's gonna be taking the element the whole time.
Actually, hold on a second. I'm gonna.
Understand what he said. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button. There.
They're acting very sovereignty, and citizenry, and they won't be themselves. If they're both the registered owners of the car, neither of them want them. I have to drag you there one way or another, but she's gonna be taking the element the whole time.
So that comment that Officer Steger makes is we were going to get them one way or another, and we were going to take the element of color the whole time.
Right there is a blatantly racist comment. That right there is completely unacceptable, and it shows that all pretext of it being for a safety check or blowing through a stop sign is not accurate, because he admits right there he was going to get them no matter what. Go ahead, Sam.
Before we continue playing this, I do want to let it be known that this is a lieutenant for Macomb Police Department who Seizure is saying this to. That is the person that I call to request for help, because typically what I do know is that they typically do train a little bit more supervisors and whatnot. They train them a little bit more when it comes to human rights. When it comes to civil rights and human rights, they are trained a little bit more when it comes to the protection of those rights for people. And that is the reason why I requested a supervisor, was because I felt as though if I wasn't going to get any type of protection from this gentleman, this guy who, and I'm sorry, that's being very nice, me saying gentleman and guy. That is very nice right now. But if I felt as though I wasn't going to get any protection from this individual in which I pay to protect me, then I felt like, okay, I need to call a supervisor or someone that I know is trained to kind of protect our rights and our laws, uphold that. And so that is what I did. And they sent Lieutenant Rollins to the scene, and Officer Seizure stated this to Lieutenant Rollins. So Rollins was made aware right there that my rights are being violated, being infringed, that we had done nothing wrong, and that this was race baited. He was made aware of that as a lieutenant, and that's a big problem.
And
that's an incredibly big problem.
Right. And I will just say that hearing that right there, the lieutenant should have taken over that scene, and because he should have realized that something was not right. He does not. But again, you're being illegally detained for not having broken any laws whatsoever. And I want to point out to our white people watching this that, and I'm going to put on my EMS instructor hat here, but you can see that Megan and Corey are comforting each other. They are trying to get through this. They are documenting the evidence as best they can in case they don't make it. That is a trauma behavior learned and born of racial trauma, intergenerational racial trauma with policing. And because we know that so many Black folks have ended up dead after interactions like this, it is perfectly understandable. And in fact, one would even expect somebody to want to do that for their own safety, because you want to leave evidence behind if you feel like you may not make it through an encounter. So all of this all of Megan's behavior, the way that Corey's behaving, all of those are easily explainable within the sequelae of a trauma-informed lens on this. Now, we don't necessarily know for sure what was said in that transcript. Like, we're going to have to go back and really listen hard to that. But at any level, mentioning color like that, that will get you fired from any other job, or it should get you fired from any other job. But there, it's just taken as, oh, okay, no problem, which we know that there's other problems. So go ahead, Sam.
Trying to figure out what's going on. And we were trying to get that time where we were like investigator, made a full stop, made a right, big note right hand, and then the civil service pulled us over. For no reason, we asked everybody to know we want. Then the middle time, we didn't want to say what you said, we can see the full stop. We said no, we can see the full stop. So it's one word against another. And I told them we're not going to do it. First of all, again, we have not seen the time, so we're not going to do any information.
Neither of the registered owners of this vehicle has followed driver's license.
Okay, again, yes, sir. Again, we're not going to do any, we're not, unless we're doing the time.
That's all for that. Can you try running the mail for Alabama? Right now, I'm just trying to figure out okay, well, neither one of you has a valid driver's license.
Again, we're not, again.
You were right.
Again, we just told you that we have to have a driver's license. And we have not seen the time. We have not put any information to you. We have not put any information to you for you.
It would help if he showed us the license.
We have we know both of you guys double that, so we know what this is about. That's why I have you on tape right now. It's not you, it's another guy in the truck. It's another guy in the truck. You know you're on the truck, because I said this before. I said, I saw you guys at the Walmart, and you doubled that, just for fun with us, for no reason. We have not cleared the time, so I said, I will have to use these to make information. Then there has not cleared the time for my husband. We made a complete stop.
Sorry, we weren't able to set up this stream tonight, or as soon as we're done with this.
What was that, Heather?
Yeah, real quick. So I want to point out for everyone watching again, remind them, Megan was the passenger in this vehicle. She has committed no crime. They are being illegally detained at this point and in fear because they know their rights are being violated. You can see that Corey has just been sitting there the entire time, other than comforting his wife, has not done anything. And he is, of course, again, a two-time decorated war veteran. And he was, just getting off of work, and they are pulled over for a non-violation after, and Megan did inform the supervisor, hey, these guys were following us. They were trying to find a pretext to pull us over, and now they pulled us over and detained us, and we are not guilty of any crime. And now
Right.
you see them put hands on Corey. Go ahead, Megan.
And the most disturbing part about that with Lieutenant Rollins is that I called him. I called, dispatch to request assistance for help. There was not one point in time of that situation where he came, where he presented himself in a helpful or peaceful manner. He never once asked us, are we okay? What seems to be the problem? I was the one fishing the entire time for answers as to what is going on here. There was not one time where I felt as though he did his job with trying to understand the situation or even come to, my aid or my assistance, being that I did request him. So he was nowhere, he was not in any way, shape, or form concerned about me or my safety or my overall well-being.
And there is no apparent de-escalation attempt by either of these officers or the 911 dispatcher. And a dispatcher, or even if these officers were trained properly to de-escalate, they would understand where the anxiety that, Megan, what you're doing, perfectly understandable through the trauma lens and racial justice lens. But now I'm real concerned because Corey is perfectly innocent here. But now he's got an officer's hands on him, even though he's done nothing wrong.
Right, exactly. And then when you watch that video in a little more in detail, you will see that as Lieutenant Rollins is proceeding to put my husband under arrest and handcuffs, Seizure makes an effort to walk over to him and reach out and grab my husband too, trying to make two officers against one defenseless man. And she was trying to be excessive and use excessive force right then and there. It was just that my husband was not being a threat. So, there was no means to use excessive force when we're not a threat.
And again, ostensibly, they are saying that they are detaining him and now arresting him for not having ID. Is that correct?
Well, they didn't say anything. They just put him under arrest. And I said, what is he, are you arresting him? What is he being arrested for? And I think that's when I heard Lieutenant Rollins state that he's been arrested for not having a license. And I said, that's not valid. That's incorrect. He does have one. And in that footage that's about to play, you will see me walking over once I realized that the situation was escalating more than what it already had escalated. They were trying to arrest my husband at that time. That's when I said, I am going to produce this information because my hands are being tied behind my back now. I am being pushed against the wall. I have no option but to submit.
Mm-hmm. And in this, before we play this next part, we're going to put a content warning on this because this escalates rather rapidly and it is very disturbing. But let's talk about what happens if you don't have your license on you. Then they can detain you, but they cannot arrest you. Based on that cannot be, that's a constitutional rights violation to basically restrain and detain someone longer than just the opportunity to get a license. And you have, obviously given an opportunity to find that license. And now, Megan, we had talked about how the paperwork in the computer may have gotten messed up a bit. But that was a mistake made at the Secretary of State's office, which was later remedied through no fault of either of yours. And yet that played into this a little bit on the other end coming out of it. Correct. So we're going to proceed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, you're correct about that. My husband had a license when we were pulled over, as he still does. And there was an issue, as I was informed. This issue has happened several times before recently, especially under the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And that apparently something on Jesse White, Secretary of State, end happened to where there was a mix-up with my husband's license. And because of that, it kind of faulted in the officers stating that my husband was not valid with his license, and that was not accurate. He did have that proof with him. He had his license on him. It had an expiration date and an issue date. So yeah, everything that was being stated at that moment was a matter of hearsay and was not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing that was proof that they had that was sufficient.
And of course, a quick check of if they had actually checked his license, they would have seen that it was a legit license, and that should have tipped them off that there was something amiss. And under COVID, they have seen problems with that before. So how many white people have been arrested for that clerical error? But okay, we're going to go ahead and play this. Megan and Corey, you may wish to look away and just breathe through this while we get through this next part. Go ahead, Sam.
So right now I need to put your hands behind your back.
Okay, wow. So he's been arrested for not having a valid driver's license supposed to. He has one. So it's okay, honey. I'll come and get you out.
That's all, so we're not about to go.
Have your valid driver's license. Do you have your license on you, honey?
So the next step, I want to time.
He's not resisting. He's
Where are you going?
See what you're grabbing out of the car.
I'm getting my purse out of the car.
Okay, I'm gonna watch you. I'm gonna watch you. I don't know you. I don't know
Step
you.
back a little bit because I feel threatened right now. I feel threatened. I need you to step back to Seizure. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and have other reports. Guys are just way too much. Don't worry too much. Thousands of people threatening us. I have not yet you consent to search my vehicle. Please step away.
All right, and then this is where she calls 911 the second time.
Search my vehicle. Please step away.
Hello?
Yes, I need additional assistance here, please. I have Officer Seizure here and the supervisor. I have asked him to step back from me because I feel
You need to quit calling 911.
Excuse me, this is an emergency.
It's not an emergency.
It's an emergency.
It's not an emergency.
This is an emergency. I feel threatened for my life. My life is in danger. I feel fear for my life. Why am I being arrested? I'm not.
Okay, let's stop that right there for a second.
And we'll be able to see the footage in a moment of that interaction as well, but yes.
I just want to add, when Officer Seizure approached the passenger side of my vehicle as I was approaching it to retrieve my husband's license, I heard him say he doesn't know me. I don't know him. It's apparent that none of us know each other, and that is why I feel fear for my life. So for him to state that was unnecessary.
Mhm. And again, he has made, remember, this officer, now I will say that, sure, it's credible that an officer would want to, and they're trained to watch people's hands just to make sure that they're not pulling out a gun. But remember, she is innocent and Corey's innocent. And they've committed no crime. There's nothing in evidence that they are any danger whatsoever. They are both FOID card owners. You don't get to be that if you're, if you've had problems. And at this point, they have no reason to detain and no reason to conduct a search and no reason to be taking Corey into custody because they have a license right there on site that they could be looking at. But instead, they're detaining Corey, and now they are, Officer Steiger, who has already violated their rights several times now, is not de-escalating, but rather just sticking to what his agenda is, as opposed to trying to make the situation have a different outcome. So go ahead, Sam.
All right, so here's that interaction and content warning.
Yes, I need additional assistance here, please. I have Officer Seizure here and the supervisor. I have asked him to step back from me because I feel threatened.
You need to quit calling 911.
Excuse me, this is an emergency. I have a right to call 911 when it's an emergency.
That's what she on 911.
I feel threatened for my life. My life is in danger. I feel fear for my life.
On your back.
Why am I being arrested?
Let's use some 911.
I'm not. Do not hurt my arm.
Yeah.
Corey, do you see this? Do you see this? If I misuse of 911, do not. I'm a female. What the fuck?
So no woman should ever be treated like that, and I'm just going to say that is ridiculous.
And I'm going to say that at that point, let me let you all know that there is a provision in the disorderly conduct statute that does state that misuse of 911 for non-emergency purposes is a violation of that statute. However, I will tell you that, and again, I'm a former EMS instructor and paramedic. That was written that way so that, there are people who do repetitively call because they have a mental health condition or compulsion, and they wanted to put that in there so that it would be for the protection of resources of the 911 system, but also so that they could, get those people who have that problem, which is not this couple at all, to be court ordered to get mental health therapy so that that stops happening. But it was never intended to be used as a way to punish community members, citizens, from calling 911 on the police when they felt threatened by the police. But this is just one case of multiple cases where the Macomb Police Department has used, and 911 and our community has allowed Black folks, particularly Black women, to be arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. And some of them ended up getting, going to court and found guilty of it. And it has impacted their ability to work. It has impacted their ability to get housing. It has impacted their ability to even volunteer with that on their record, because disorderly conduct makes it sound like they were fighting. They weren't. We were sufficiently concerned about this that we wrote it up and we submitted it to several allies around the state. I am a board member on the ACLU of Peoria, and we wrote legislation that now they are looking at attaching or passing this legislative session that will enshrine the human right to call 911 on a supervisor, or any time that you feel like you need a supervisor for any emergency services, whether that be police, fire, EMS, if you feel, that you need that. And, there's something that as a white person, I would never have questioned. It didn't even occur to me it would be used this way. I am honestly beside myself to find that this is how people get treated. Megan is just one of several Black women that this has happened to. And so let's keep rolling it up. But already this case is so egregious that it's already changing Illinois law. So go ahead, Sam.
Hold on, Heather.
Hold
Before
on.
we continue,
Yeah, go right ahead.
I just want to state, seeing this and actually living through it, I was very angry when I seen that happen to my wife. And I really couldn't do anything about it because of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a police officer right there next to me with a weapon. So if I would have done anything.
Right. That would have been cause for them to possibly hurt and perhaps even worse to you. And I will just state that is harming a military veteran's wife in front of him is an escalation right there. And punishing her for calling 911 for a supervisor in front of a military veteran who's gone to war for this country 2 times, that right there is completely unacceptable. Corey, I am just so, I'm so sorry that this has happened. There's no level where any of this is acceptable. So,
Yeah, Corey, you didn't go overseas twice, well, maybe more than twice, depending on your service, but you didn't go overseas and fight for us to come home and be treated like this, and especially not your wife.
And also to be clear, 911 dispatchers are supposed to be independent public servants, and they're supposed to function as a bit of oversight for our public servants in the field. Why? Because you, as a police officer, they do deal with a lot of vicarious trauma. And, we see in the George, I'm sorry, I need to take a breather. I can't go over that part of it right now, but 911 dispatchers clearly they're not supposed to ever be colluding or punishing people or speaking to them that way. None of that is okay either. They definitely have to be trained. They have to maintain professionalism. They should never show bias. They definitely should never talk to somebody that way. That is lack of training at best. That may be, colluding to violate their rights. And that dispatcher needs to be investigated too. So, okay. Anything else, Corey or Megan, before we get into this next part? I know it's going to be really rough.
Yeah, I just want to add, like my husband said, seeing it now versus living it is two totally separate, different things. It's two totally separate, different experiences. My husband, he was defenseless in that matter, in that instance. And, Officer Seizure, he came up to me very forcefully and aggressively, and he grabbed my arm that was holding my phone. And he literally tried to break every bone in my arm, literally. And you can't see it as well as if you were there in person. And so, yeah, for my husband to have to see another man handling his wife, and I am not that big. I am 5'5", 130, 135 pounds. And so to see this man that's 6 foot or over, and he's coming to me with force. I have not been a threat to him or anyone else. I'm not being non-compliant. I am not, fighting or resisting arrest or anything. But he came to me very forcefully in front of my husband with the intent to harm me. And they did it because what they wanted was a reaction from my husband, knowing his background, so they could have a justifiable reason as to causing or inflicting harm on both of us that day. You heard it. He said that they were going to get us one way or another. They conspired and they approached this situation with the intent to harm us, and they treated us as such.
And that's our read on it too. What they're doing, handcuffing both of you when you've done nothing wrong, you've committed no crime, you have been peaceful, you have been concerned, anxious, and scared, understandably so. Through the lens of racial trauma, your behaviors make perfect sense, and officers who were properly trained and ethical and wanted to de-escalate would have taken a very different approach to this. We didn't see them do any of that. There was no emotional first aid provided at this point. There was no, there was just no talk of, hey, we're just trying to get through this. We're sorry this was a misunderstanding. Let's work this out. None of that. And what we believe we're seeing right here is assumption of criminality, which is an implicit bias that we often see in police officers. And then it seems like they are trying to fish for making the facts fit what they thought they were going to find. So at this point, we're going to roll this through. This next part, again, content warning, this continues to escalate. Go ahead, Sam.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you see this mischief in my way? And I'm being threatened and fixed. My wife and her is going to step back from me so I can get your ID, Corey. Ask this freaking guy to step back so I can get your ID. To make any sense. Ridiculous. Just wanted to fuck with us. Wanted to.
And this is a trauma to Corey, although he's not showing it on his face.
So this next slide is going to be a major content warning. The two videos are side by side, so that way you can see inside of the vehicle and outside. The inside cam is muted, so that way there's no overlapping audio, as the audio is the same.
And I'll just let's pause for a quick second, and Megan and Corey, I'll just remind you, let's breathe through this. If you have some water to drink, go ahead and drink your water right now. Let's, try to steel yourself for this next part. If you don't want to watch it, we understand. You may want to turn down your audio at least to mute the impact of that. Go ahead, Sam.
And
Hold on,
we can
Heather.
pause as
Megan's
well.
actually going to step away from the room for a second, and I'm going to turn this down. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Take care of yourself. We've got this.
Just let us know when you're ready.
And we do use a trauma-informed approach when we are working on racial justice issues, because just the act of viewing your rights being violated, the act of viewing this is a re-traumatization for both of them. They are likely to experience more an uptick, a lot of stirring up of their PTSD symptoms over the next several days to weeks after just doing this press conference. And so we are trying to take it at a pace that will give them an opportunity to add some resiliency in it, stepping away when it gets overwhelming and such. Okay, Megan and Corey, are you okay if we proceed? I don't think they can hear us now.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Ma'am, I hate to break you, but your charge is a felony. Misuse of 911.
I did not do anything wrong.
Felony disorderly conduct.
But when they see the review, when they see the tape, they will see that I asked you to step back and you refused to step back.
Have a seat, please. Watch your head.
No problem.
At this point, it's hot in there and he has no windows rolled down and the heat turned up.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to keep them in sync.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay.
So now he's doing an illegal search of Corey and an illegal search of their car. They have no probable cause.
Hey, there's a bunch of other magazines and whatnot. We'll make sure we get him patted down.
And they are FOIA card owners.
Well, the vehicle's getting towed, man, so we gotta do an inventory and we gotta find your guys' IDs.
Can you pause those for a second, Sam?
Yep.
To be clear, that's an illegal search. Everything else stemming after that is immaterial. There was nothing in plain sight for which they would have been able to claim a search, and they did not remark on anything in the report that would have been made that a legal search. So this is a fishing expedition. Again, he is a military veteran. They do have, some gun paraphernalia. They're both FOIA card owners and live in rural McDonough County. So they do have, weapon stuff with them, as an awful lot of our people do. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, and I also want to add that Megan had previously said that the heat was on full blast in this squad car, and it was a very hot squad car. So I just want you all to take that into context.
And remember, Carrie been traumatized by this. She's being illegally held. She and her husband have been gaslit. That comment that he made, that you're being given a felony for calling 911, that's not generally a felony. We believe that was gaslighting with the intention of frightening her or saying we're going to ruin your life.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. They were trying to provoke a reaction. The entire time they were antagonizing us and provoking us.
And violating your rights. Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
And Megan, at this point in time, were you trying to call your sister?
I stepped away, so I'm going to assume that this is the part where I'm in the back of the cop car. Yeah, I was attempting to. Both of my hands were handcuffed behind my back, so I had to maneuver to get my phone to call my sister, and I did attempt to call her. And I do want to let it be known that when I was put into the car, the heat was on. All the windows were up, all the doors were locked. I was handcuffed, defenseless, and the heat was on. So I am going to step away. I cannot keep reliving this, especially this part. But yes, I was attempting to call my sister.
And to use a trauma-informed lens on this next point part, I will just point out that, so we have someone who's already in fear of her life. Her rights have been violated. She is innocent in this. She has committed no crime. She's being illegally detained. She's already been traumatized. Her anxiety is quite high. And now she's in a super hot car in the sun on a warm day away
Yes.
from her husband.
and I've asked for help in this car. You can clearly see Lieutenant Rollins look at me 3 or 4 different times asking and requesting for help, which is a part of their job, especially noticing that someone is in distress
That's
and is requesting help, being in distress.
And they
I was literally maybe 4 seconds away from going unconscious in the car. 4 seconds.
Yeah, and people do, when they get very anxious, they begin to hyperventilate, and that's a very understandable reaction. And if they do not have assistance to de-escalate, or for affect regulation, then, and they're deprived of their normal support, like normally Corey would be there helping her. Normally a police officer should have rolled down the window a little bit and said, I'm gonna roll it down, so if you have any concerns, are you comfortable? None of that is happening, right? It's just
Yeah.
being charged with felony.
If they would have done any of that, that would have, I mean, been just right then and there a great deal for me, a relief. Like you said, Heather, I was and I am still mentally distraught. I was in fear for my life. My mental ability to be able to register everything that was going on was not, I was not able to do that. And again, I was really overall in fear for my life. I was literally in fear. And so because I was in fear, I knew that I was in the back of that car, mentally freaking out and physically freaking out. I told myself that I needed to calm down or I was going to die in the back of the car because nobody wanted to assist me. Nobody was helping me. Nobody acted as though they were willing to help me. And so I said, oh my God, I've seen this repeatedly over and over and over again on the news, and I'm about to be another statistic on the news in the back of a cop car pleading for help because I can't breathe. And so that freaked me out even more. And literally, if it was 4 more seconds, I would have been unconscious in the back of the car. So yeah, I literally was in fear for my life and I was in distress. Horribly, horribly bad.
And we'll also point out that, Megan had called 911 to ask for a supervisor to de-escalate in service to safety for everybody involved. And what happened was she got what we call institutional injustice when the 911 dispatcher verbally abused her and basically told her, you're on your own, we don't care. I mean, that kind of response from a paid public servant, there is nothing about that that is acceptable on any level. It hasn't been acceptable ever for 911 dispatchers to respond like that, but to tell a person essentially that this institution doesn't care about your concerns. That adds to the trauma of this on top of already all these. So now we have human rights violations. What's happening, Megan, is a human rights violation, right? We have constitutional rights violations, illegal detention, illegal search, illegal seizure, and civil rights violations as well. So, okay. Now, Megan, if you need to step away on this next part, we'll let this play a little bit longer here. Go ahead, Sam, when you're ready.
All right.
So it's hot in there, and you can see that she is, her anxiety is climbing in her fear. She's not having anyone de-escalate. Nobody is listening to her, and because they didn't roll down the windows, she can't communicate.
I'm in handcuffs. I can't breathe. I can't breathe, Zane. Hello.
And people with panic attacks understand what that feels like.
I can't breathe. Can I let the window be?
And all she's asked for is a window be put down a bit so that she gets some fresh air. So this is a panic attack, and an EMS provider would recognize this as a panic attack, and they would demand that the cuffs be removed and she be de-escalated, and then we would help her regain affect control and make sure that the things that would help her feel safe would be done. None of that's being done, none of it. That officer is just ignoring her entirely. The lieutenant is ignoring her too. He looks back at her, doesn't do any of it. You can see that Corey is very worried about his wife. He's helpless. He's trying to be safe himself. Anyone with a panic attack should receive de-escalation and basic mental health first aid. And our public servants have all been trained in that. Right.
Sir, I cannot breathe. Please, sir, please give me air. Please. Please. Please.
Right then and there, a trained person would have realized, oh, that's a panic attack. We need to de-escalate and help her feel safe.
Was there something you wanted to add, Heather? I'm sorry.
Yeah, on this, I mean, Megan's distress is very hard to watch because, for me, just because, remember, last summer, we brought up these problems to our city repeatedly, letting them know that we had many complaints that women, Black folks, were being treated like this by officers, and we couldn't even get on the agenda. And we were telling them they needed to start looking for human and civil rights violations, and that our police were really having some problematic behaviors or lack of response, or just complete non-response to mental health crises. And at this point, you know, this is fear. I mean, this is all understandable, right? But this is a manufactured mental health crisis that didn't need to happen. And this is Corey's birthday. The rest of his life, the rest of their lives as a couple, this is how they're going to remember this birthday, right? So yeah, there's just nothing. The fact that she's not receiving any attention whatsoever just speaks to the callousness of this call and the inappropriate, just the fact that she's being punished basically for calling for a supervisor, right? And being put through this. And we have our military veteran Corey sitting there trying to survive this, trying not to look scared, but very concerned about his wife at this point and helpless to do anything about it. That is an awful position to put someone in. If they didn't respect her, you would think they would have respected him enough to care about, you know, making it look like they wanted to treat his wife humanely, but that none of that's happening. Go ahead, Sam, roll it forward.
Yep.
Corey, this is fucked up. It's so fucked up, Corey. I swear to God.
So here she is trying to call her sister now.
You help me now.
Calling someone is a perfectly understandable act during a
Ma'am, I have asked them, ma'am, I cannot breathe. Ma'am, I'm serious. I'm trying to breathe. Please help me breathe. Ma'am, I need some air. I need some air. It's too hot in here. It's way too hot. I have to have some air. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not. I need you guys to calm down because you guys are just doing a lot. Me and my husband's a veteran. We've never done nothing wrong. All I called and I asked for extra assistance. And this guy said, he treated me forcefully like a criminal. He said I committed a crime. And I said, man, I have some extra assistance, please. I feel fear for my life. I understand what I'm saying. I feel fear for my life, and I don't understand what's going on right now. We did a regular stop. They've been fucking with us.
At this point, de-escalation should be happening.
Did you want me to pause?
Yeah, just real quick. That's a missed opportunity for de-escalation. You can clearly hear the distress. Now, I will say this is something that our white community members would perceive differently than our Black community members. But I will tell you that as white people, we are culturally conditioned to believe that raising our voice is a sign of disrespect. And if you don't understand that that is pretty much just a white thing, That isn't the way everybody's raised, and raising your voice when you are in fear of your life and having an anxiety attack and speaking about the injustices to you, there is nothing wrong with that. She is appropriately venting out and trying to explain why she is in distress. We would expect anyone to do that, whether they were Black or white, in service to their own self-protection. She is trying to ask them to intervene to stop this series of escalations that she has every right as a Black woman to expect, to just continue. She is trying to de-escalate the situation. She's trying to appeal to all of these officers to please intervene. I will tell you that after the new law comes into effect, when other officers realize something is going wrong, they will be obligated to interrupt that. Otherwise, they can be subjected to felony. So, okay, Sam, go ahead and keep rolling on this. Illegal search is continuing.
Also noticed radio got significantly louder when they took her out of the car.
I do not consent.
Okay. They are conducting an illegal search of their car. They both are handcuffed despite having committed no crime. Yeah, just keep rolling it, Sam. Where's the next? How long does it go on for the next event on this one?
It's coming up. I can't remember the exact time stamp, but there's only like 15 minutes left.
Go ahead and keep rolling. I'll let the dog out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally hit the wrong button. That was my bad. I apologize. Give me just a moment. Oh. Just 1 second. I do apologize for that. It is a little difficult to keep all the videos at the right pace. Marshall, is there any chance you could mute yourself, please? I can just hear you moving around a little bit.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just a second here.
So we can touch their cars. Oh, I know. I'm just saying, baby, like, let's detain them and let's just say some shit. We didn't even give any criminal information, but let's do all this stuff and let. The DMV doesn't have your shit correct. How is that our fault? That you did your shit, that you did your test, that you had your ID. I'll get your phone.
So now we see Corey being put in this hot vehicle.
What was that, Heather?
Now we see Corey being put in the vehicle, illegally detained, having committed no crime.
And now that Corey is in the back seat, this is when they really start digging through their vehicle, and you can kind of hear them talking back and forth a little bit.
Okay. That's what we call a fishing expedition, when you search through people's vehicles, but you don't have any any legal right to do so.
She can go for an issue to 911. Excuse me, sir. Yeah. Excuse me, sir. Could you do me a favor? Yeah. In my pocket, could you reach my phone for me? I would like to call her sister, so she can. You can't call right now. You'll be able to call from the jail. Okay. We have food cooking at home, so that's the whole point. I would rather us. Yeah. No, I hear you. We'll get taken care of you in a second. I'm gonna set your other canvas cartridge with the other ones up there. Obviously, you're booking, but if they want to, just hold it.
At this point, Megan had been taken to.
What was that, Heather?
At this point, Megan had been taken to jail already when Denise Kramer, is that correct?
I believe so.
I don't know if you, okay, yes, guys. At this point, I had been taken in already. They had immediately got me out of there as quickly as they could. And it was a Officer Kramer, a lady, who put me into her SUV, the woman that I asked if she could help me breathe. And if she could unloosen my handcuffs because they were so tight that they were cutting off my circulation. My hands were freezing cold. And so she she transported me to the jail, in which I was placed by a 4x4 holding cell for about 4 or 5 hours. So I was left there to rot for 4 or 5 hours, and pretty much wasn't checked in on for my general well-being, other than to ask about bonding my husband out. So I was left back there and no one checked in on me. The only time someone came back there was to ask me about bonding my husband out. But yes, at that point in time, I had been transported by a woman, Officer Kramer, to the jail.
Going to rolling, Sam.
All right. So he didn't even know what the charges were for storing the gun properly were.
anything on your way up there, give them a call once you get up there. What's up, Dad? Oh, yeah.
I love you. I love you. Don't worry. We'll be all right. I love you.
Oh, everywhere, all over the back. Like, if there's another gun in there, I'm not shocked. There's so much shit. What do they got ammo? This was in here, around in the chamber, laying like that, underneath the factory seat. So, no round in the chamber, but the magazine was seized. Yeah, can't do that. Would be at the mouth, that's the good carry. No, I'm guessing probably doesn't figure
That would
that
be a
out.
illegal transportation at best. Let's stop that for a second.
That's assumption of criminality, assuming he does not have a concealed carry permit.
Yep. And also remember, this is an illegal search. They didn't have a right to go rifling through their vehicle, but they found their legally owned weapons. They both, again, are FOID card owners. And yeah, and again, no charges were filed against them, or all charges were dropped against Corey, and no charges were filed against Megan by the state's attorney at all for any of this. So she's going through all this as an innocent person. And as a white person, how would we have handled that, right? Having our rights violated, worried about our lives, and of course we wouldn't be worried in the same way for our lives as a Black person would, but Black folks would be understandably terrified by this. So go ahead.
I can tell you, as a white trauma survivor, police terrify me, and I probably would have reacted the same way, if not worse.
I mean, I think they did a remarkable job trying to stay calm. They kept trying to advocate for themselves and each other. They kept trying to ask for things that would help them feel, less powerless. But again, this whole thing is, it's all illegal. So go ahead, Sam.
For some AR-22, some of these were in the glove box, and then these are in our purse.
Not illegal it's not illegal to carry bullets. But also you can't just rifle through and look for things to try to.
If you don't mind. I don't know what these are. Those look like those little I guess for now, shows what it is here. Just put those in the bag. We'll take them and we'll secure all that anyway. All right. Thank you. I don't think I have one with me. To be honest, I don't know, but I will look. Okay. I turned around on Jackson Street and just gave me another shit look. They got backed off over there. And just completely blew through that stop sign. I'm like, I know that stop sign.
Completely blew through that stop signs. They already misrepresenting what happened on the record.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't even a stop sign. I mean, it wasn't a municipal stop sign. It was a private stop sign. They were under no obligation to stop. That distinction is never mentioned once.
And his comment about them giving him a shit look, if I was being hunted, I would be giving somebody a pretty bad look myself.
Yep. If you see 3 police cars following you around town, I can completely understand somebody looking fearfully or angrily or anything else. Yep. Through a trauma-informed lens makes perfect sense. And it's not illegal to give a cop a shit look. Put it on look station here. Is there anything else on this one, Sam? I can't remember. Is there anything else on this one? Otherwise, we can roll to the next.
This is the last of the video footage. It shows him taking photos of the air freshener in the little pom pom hanging from the rearview mirror.
Okay, yeah, and we have those photos in the press kit, which we will be happy to give to anyone who wants to see it. But again, that air freshener is in the news nationally right now because that, of course, is a pretext that has cost many Black folks their lives. But those air fresheners are smaller than the WIU hang tags that we all have in our vehicles for those of us who work at the institution. And so it's interesting that something that's smaller than the hang tag would be used as an excuse. Okay, yeah, keep rolling it. Let's roll all the way to the end because Corey does have a conversation.
Yep.
Please.
Hey, Lester, can you do me a favor? Can I have you stand at like a 45-degree angle that way? Keep going out. Good. Wow. Yeah. Are your car keys on you, man? Yes, I do. Where they at, buddy? I don't know which pocket. Okay. Man, and you guys just bought for you wouldn't take it, so you know the deal, man. You know what I mean? I see that coming. You wouldn't have dumped back like you did at Walmart, you wouldn't be in this situation right now. I don't even know what you're talking about at Walmart. I mean, I seen you at the light. Oh, on the roadway? Yeah. Yeah. And then you turned back, you came towards us. So, yes, I don't really understand all this. If we would have cooperated, I mean, I did nothing wrong there. So what made you double back? I double back's wrong. Hey. When you go off down the side road. Yeah, because this is the way I go home. And that's not suspicious or not trying to.
Heather, I'm kind of glad you guys kept playing this because the conversation between me and the officer, it shows that he proved himself that he did double back.
I'm so sorry, Corey. I commend you for, I think that you handled that as good as anyone could be expected to.
We're almost done here.
And again, this is all private parking lot.
I got a question, sir. When my wife gets her phone call, is there any way you can tell her to call her sister? And is there any way that we would be able to give up our house keys to her? Because we got food at home cooking. And I don't want the house to burn down. You know what I'm saying? I hear you. Do you have her sister's phone number? I mean, it's in my phone. But the guy was saying that he would have to wait till we get down to the station to make a phone call. So yeah, we will, but we're almost there. You can call him once we get to the jail.
So again, he's innocent. He has done nothing wrong. He's been arrested. His wife is already at the jail, ostensibly for not stopping at a stop sign that was a private stop sign on private property.
I don't recall any more dialogue, but
Okay, I don't think there is on this, if I'm remembering right. So now, on his birthday, Corey is now being illegally detained and taken to jail. His property has been illegally seized, illegally searched, and he doesn't know what's happening with his wife right now.
Hey, do you guys hear the music in the background playing? I really don't understand why he was listening to it.
yeah, I don't either. Unless it was just something to keep the radio audio from being heard. Maybe anything that they would have said amongst each other, maybe something like that, or maybe it was just something to try to keep you quiet, because that is a tactic too.
But
And I'm sorry, Corey.
right. White people would see that as, trying to be calming, but playing music that is, that's not calming for everybody, but it also shows a cultural issue there.
It's also not professional.
Right.
This is their job that we pay for.
Yeah.
They should not be listening to any type of music, especially when there's when there's a person in the back of the car.
Right. I mean, if you were to, you would never play music in an ambulance, never. It's one thing if you're just by yourself or with somebody else who you work with and there's nobody in the back, but when you have somebody in there, you wouldn't do that. Okay, so now we've got, so let's go over what is the federal definition of domestic terrorism? It means activities that involve acts dangerous to human life, that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or any state, appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government or intimidation or coercion, or to affect or conduct the government of a government by mass, it goes on for that. But so this is not the only case here that we have of this. We have multiple cases where Black women in particular have been, we have some with Black men as well, but have been punished for calling 911 and put into jail and charged with disorderly conduct. Now that's right there says that, okay, if your rights are being violated, shut up and take it. That's an intimidation tactic that has affected our Black community. And worse, Officer Steiger is the officer who was the arresting officer in the Ariel Harrison case, where she suffered a head injury, was left unconscious in the jail with no medical care for an indeterminate amount of hours, ostensibly for a DUI for which they never took blood and didn't give her a breathalyzer, but then claimed that she was impaired. She was driving, she is a disabled, she is blind in one eye. And so she was driving on a cold, wet, rainy night. And the officer Steiger had actually started following her instead of a vehicle that actually met the description of what the alleged call was. And then she ended up suffering harm and ended up incarcerated in our jail because she doesn't have financial privilege for several days. And when she got out, she tried to put in a complaint, but this is really an ongoing problem. So Sam, is there anything else on this one?
I forgot I muted myself. Anyways, that's all that's on this slide. The
Okay.
next few slides are statements from Megan's mother and her sister.
Hold on, before we continue,
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go
I
ahead.
just want to clarify something really quick. You know, in our military training, we are told escalation of force. Do not shoot unless somebody is being, unless you're being fired upon. And do not shoot unless you have positive identification. That's something that the police officers really aren't trained. And if I were to do something like that overseas and kill somebody, I would be in Leavenworth. But the police officers over here in the United States, they get a pat on the back and a badge to kill. To me, that's what it seems like.
And here we can see that they have no expectation of any consequences for all the rights violations here, because we know that there's many cases like this in McDonough County, perhaps dozens. This one really illustrates, though, how these people have worked together and violated both your rights, Megan's rights, and are doing it without any concern whatsoever that they might be questioned, that they might be held accountable. And that speaks to a culture of a department, because there's nobody saying, you know what, wait a minute, let's just talk about this. This doesn't seem right to me. If that lieutenant didn't understand that the stop sign that was there is not a municipal stop sign, but a private stop sign, that's a problem in and of itself. But then to just go along with rights violations without verifying that they had a right to even illegally, to search your vehicle, that also speaks to training, that speaks to oversight. There's just a lot of problems here. Now, this next slide, we're going to put a content warning on, because this is what their families were going through, because Megan had called her sister and said, I can't breathe. Nobody's listening to me, which was true statements, right? Somebody who's having anxiety struggles with the ability to, they get what we call air hunger. And even though that they can speak during it, that does not mean that the feeling of air hunger isn't there. It is still there. It is still operating. It's because they're so adrenalized at that point that they are struggling to be able to take deep enough breaths to blow off carbon dioxide so that they don't feel even more breathless. And that's one of the things as a paramedic you learn to differentiate between what is breathlessness from lung issues, or somebody having an anaphylactic reaction, or maybe they've got a pulmonary emboli, versus somebody whose brain is literally telling them they need to breathe faster because they're not getting enough breath, but it's actually giving a miscommunication, because the problem is under anxiety, you blow off too much carbon dioxide, and that sends a signal to the brain, uh-oh, better breathe faster. We know only one problem and one fix is to breathe faster. So everything that Megan described is both a medical issue and a mental health issue at the time, but not all of it was brought on by this illegal stop. So let's go ahead and continue with these letters, and I will go ahead and read them.
Okay, and then I just want to note that I use the names from the emails, so they may not be correct, but
Okay,
that's what was
by
given.
Therese Staples, Megan's mother. On Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021, I received an urgent phone call stating that my daughter and son-in-law were both being detained by the Macomb Police Department. No reason was given at the time. I was at work in a panic, right? A Black mother would be in a panic over that, and extremely concerned for their safety. I also reside nearly 3 hours away and wasn't able to get to Macomb, so I immediately contacted my sister and asked her to call the police department ASAP to inquire about why they were arrested. Because remember, these are, he's a military veteran and they've done nothing wrong. After I got off work, I also called the police department many times and was not given any information regarding the arrest. And at least on one occasion, an officer hung up the phone on me. That is a complaint we hear a lot, that officers hang up the phone on Black folks calling for questions. My son-in-law was released the same day of the arrest, but my daughter was held hostage in a jail cell all night. She was released the following day. Remember, she's done nothing wrong. That's a legal detention. That is a human rights violation. That's a constitutional civil rights violation. I am the mother of a Black daughter and a Black son-in-law, and on March 2nd, 2021, one of my worst fears came to pass. Having our children stopped and detained by the police is a Black parent's worst nightmare, because we don't know if the stop will lead to an illegal execution for our children. So this mother is now traumatized by this illegal stop and this illegal detainment. So now we've traumatized their family, right? And this is our paid public servants that have created this. On March 2nd, 2021, I did not know if my daughter would make it out of that jail alive, as so many have not. Sandra Bland, right? And so now we have a family that has suffered grievous mental harm and traumatic racial trauma. And she's wondering for over 20 hours when a simple confirmation, ma'am, I'm sorry, I understand your fear. I will let you know that I just spoke with Megan, or I will go talk with her, but I verified, I have eyes on her. She is fine. She is safe right now. She will be getting, her processed and through this, and then you'll be able to speak with her. And my name is this, and my badge number is this. And I'm sorry for the trouble, but it is our intent to work on this together. And everybody will.
It's simple, right, Heather?
Right.
It's simple. They didn't have to make my family or me suffer in that way. My mom,
Right.
she has so many health issues. I was in there for over 20 hours. None of me, my husband, my mom, my sister, none of us slept, none of us ate. Just the fear that we all went through for nothing, to put my family, my husband, that has been through 2 wars, to keep everyone in their family safe, for this government, for this country. And this is the type of treatment that we get for nothing but the color of our skin.
Right.
Yes, we were all in fear, including my mom, especially her and myself. And to put them through that's a violation of her rights.
Yes,
They violated her rights. They violated all of our rights because of the color of our skin. And that is unacceptable. It is unacceptable.
There is no level at which that is okay. The fact that your mother wasn't given basic information and she is your immediate relative, that speaks to not just a lack of training, but there's another thing that can't be overcome by training, and it's just a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion. Why wouldn't? And also, I will say, this is right here shows how white community members, white civil servants don't get it. If they do not understand how a Black mother would be fearful for her daughter's life while her daughter's being detained, that shows a cultural ignorance at best. And there is no excuse for that. Remember, our Racial Justice Coalition since 2019 has been trying to educate our police on this, trying to talk about how our civil servants lack the appropriate bias training. They lack the appropriate de-escalation techniques that they should be using. And so they don't get to claim that they lack that anymore because they have had training, but none of it is an evidence during any of this situation, which is really, so that means then, are they willingly depriving this family of even the basic decency of saying, she's alive, I just spoke with her, let's take care of this. May I have your number? I'm sorry. I know that this is scary. Like just a simple acknowledgement that we understand why this would be scary for a Black mother. Like, how hard would that have been?
And not
Right.
to
All
mention
my
the
family
fact,
wanted to know was that I was alive.
Right.
You know, even if I had went through a substantial amount of abuse, physical abuse, the
Right.
fact that I was still breathing was
Mhm.
enough for them to hold on, give them
Right.
some hope
Yes.
to know that I'm okay. You know, like none of it was right to put me and my whole family through this mentally, physically, the trauma, the terror. There's no cause for it. Why someone would do that? He wouldn't want it done to their families.
That's
They
right.
wouldn't tolerate it. They wouldn't stand for it. But yet
Right.
it's okay for it to be done to mine and it to be tolerable and acceptable.
And to treat a Black mother calling in fear of her daughter's life and her son-in-law's life this way is, and we do have audio on some of this. Just our dispatchers we have real concerns about the way that they handled this too. So this is her mom's statement, and remember, her mom, a simple affirmation that things were going to work out okay, that she would be released as soon as the processing got done. She shouldn't even have been there, right? Like she shouldn't even been there at all, but at least that would have stopped the racial trauma from going further. Instead, they just escalated it. The lack of information and the silencing and the degradation by hanging up, that all to a mother, I would be livid and panicking beside myself as a white mother if they did that to me. To do it to a Black mother is just blatantly offensive, completely tone deaf, and beyond ignorant. And one would say almost, you have to wonder, are they trying to be deliberately cruel?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and jump to the next one, Sam, and I'll read that.
and I just did want to make one other comment. In the booking video, where Corey was being booked, there was a point where Megan's mother did call in, and when the officer hung up, Corey asked if that was his mother-in-law, and the officer replied with, "Is your mother-in-law rude and belligerent?" I believe, is something along those lines. Maybe
How about
Corey can.
panicked and frightened and traumatized?
Corey, did he say that to you?
Yes, he did.
That is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
That is illegal. That is against protocol and procedure.
That right there is degrading someone's mother to them, is completely unacceptable on its face. It's unprofessional, and it's an escalating force to do to a Black family. That right there shows, yeah, you're right. This isn't a training issue, right? Because they can't claim that they haven't been taught this. We know they've been taught this because we've been talking about it, and we've had multiple assurances from Chief Barker that everything's all good.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Go
Is
ahead.
it the fact that my mother is Black, calling in concerned in fear of her daughter's life, that makes her rude and belligerent? Or is it the fact that she has every right to be rude and belligerent about this situation that makes her rude? And which one is it? Because I'm pretty sure she has every right, if she was rude and belligerent, to be that way.
Right.
Granted the circumstance.
Yep.
And for
right.
them to call her that and to say that to my husband, that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just the whole in general conversation right now, that because this is something that is new to me, I had no knowledge of, that has just been brought to my attention, and I am very concerned and disturbed. I'm just very concerned and disturbed about the amount of white supremacy and terrorism that is going on in Macomb and within the police department, within people who we rely on to help and protect us.
Thank
See,
you.
the thing is that it doesn't apply to all of us. It only applies to some.
Thank you for
And
calling it what it is, because this is white supremacy and this is domestic terrorism. And
is
this is
domestic-
nothing we should see in
yeah,
our police
this is what
department.
white supremacists or white supremacy, domestic terrorism looks like. And not a lot of people know. Now, which officer was it who called Megan's mother rude and belligerent? Do you remember?
I didn't have the name.
Was that one of the jailers? I thought it was one of the sheriff's deputies.
It was
Yes,
the
it was
sheriff
one of the
that,
sheriff's deputy.
Okay.
I believe that was the one that refused to come around and come around the wall and actually talk to you while he was booking you, Corey. Am I correct on that?
Really?
Yes, you are.
Tell us about that, Corey. I hadn't heard that part.
Yes, the officer was asking me about my information, and I told him I didn't want to yell, so you could come out there and talk to me in person, and he said he was fine. So that's how that went.
He refused to look him even in the face.
I'm so sorry. Okay, let's roll to the next one here.
Yep.
Statement by Mariah, Megan's sister. You called me saying you couldn't breathe. I called the police station to see what was going on. I told the dispatcher you just called me and said you were being arrested and you couldn't breathe, and I was trying to make sure you were okay. She said, yeah, she's fine. I just talked to her. So, okay. Not a great effort, but a bit of an effort. When I got to the police station, the dispatcher was very rude. She was talking about me to her coworkers. I also spoke with a police officer that said you were being charged with police misuse and a felony, so you weren't being released. I bonded Corey out and left.
I just want to make a statement that that lady 100% lied to my sister. You guys heard the dispatch conversations.
Yeah.
The dispatch conversations were earlier in the day. That was the only conversation I had that day. I was in jail in a 4x4, left there for 5 hours.
So she didn't even talk to you to be able to say to
She
your
hadn't talked to me or anything to relay that message to my sister. So that was a lie right there. And again, this is the type of trauma that they inflicted and instilled on my family and I.
And meanwhile, Mariah is wondering what is happening to her sister, because the last she knew, she couldn't breathe. She was handcuffed in a cop car for having done nothing.
Need I
And
remind you guys, I was on the phone when I was in the back of the cop car being detained with my sister. And unfortunately, she ended up getting the short end of that stick. She ended up hearing me being in fear for my life and also being in distress. She heard that, and it was very unfortunate, but she did hear it. And so she was in fear she was in fear.
Mm-hmm. And so now we have yet another member of their family who is now traumatized from this, not receiving what you would even at any level, professionalism or compassionate discourse or de-escalation, none of it. So, okay, let's go to the next.
All right. And the next slide is our asks and demands.
Okay. We demand a full investigation. We demand that these officers, now Kramer, that I don't know, but at least we need Officer Steiger to be off the street immediately. He is a danger. He blew through a red light, did a U-turn across 4 lanes of traffic, ostensibly for what he called in the report a safety violation, a routine registration check, which you would do that as a safety thing, right? So the idea that a police officer would think it's okay to put all of our, all the people on that road's lives at risk, to follow Megan and Corey, who had done nothing wrong, that right there isn't just a problem. That's not just it's not just something that can be trained out. That is a person that is unsafe at any level, cannot be made safe, and has no business behind the wheel of a police car carrying a badge and gun and being empowered with the power of life and death over other people, because he's putting lives at risk while he's literally racially profiling a two-time war vet and his wife just on the way home from work. Officer Rowland did not do anything to de-escalate that. He went along with their rights violations and doubled down, and they even gaslit them. Officer Rollins too. We couldn't hear much on Kramer, but because she did not act to do anything to correct the rights violations, to write a report, she needs to be investigated too. Come July 1st, when the new criminal justice pillar comes into effect, the law enforcement officers are going to be required to intervene, or they could be subject to felony. Any one of those officers could have intervened on this. And then it is our, it's our intent that we want these officers gone. At least Steiger needs to be gone, Rowland, Rollins. The 911 dispatcher needs to be suspended and investigated. And honestly, from our position, we believe she needs to be fired for that, because she does not have empathy and tact that will allow her to treat people decently. And her behavior alone traumatized Megan and Corey's family members in a way that they did not have to suffer. She was the person who carried that trauma forward. That was totally within her control, totally within her power to not do that. She chose instead to further gaslight them. There is no level at which that is okay, and that kind of bias can't be, whatever that is, that cannot be trained out. We deserve better public servants, people who will act with humanity and compassion fully intact, who will use their training for Black folks the same way they would ostensibly for white folks, and seek to de-escalate, seek to calm, seek to help everybody be safe. It is rather clear watching this, I think, just putting on my old EMS instructor hat here, opportunities for de-escalation don't just make the people that you're dealing with, the public, feel better and get through that with less trauma. It makes everybody safer. So at every point where you miss that opportunity and allow further escalation to continue, or worse, do even worse and can commit more rights violations and gaslight them and misrepresent the facts on the evidence. That kind of stuff right there, none of that's okay. It's not professional, but beyond that, it's dangerous. Why? We know that officers who go on to kill people have many incidents like this for which they are not investigated and held accountable. Officer Steiger, I'm going to relate something here. In 2019, we sent a letter, and this was when we were first forming the Racial Justice Coalition out of the Democratic Women. But the Democratic Women of McDonough County's parent org wrote a letter to the editor calling on Republicans to disavow the racism in their own party at the state level and the national level. I was at an event, and I don't remember the timeline, but shortly after that, and I was stopped at a stop walk at the edge of it, crossing walk. And I was about to proceed through because I had the light. And all of a sudden, a police car had turned off its lights and jammed on its gas. And I saw Officer Steiger. And the reason why I know it was him, he is very distinctive. He has very distinctive tattoos, sleeve tattoos up and down his arms. And so I literally saw his hands on the steering wheel, and that vehicle came so close to me with its lights off at night speeding through this crosswalk. I knew he had seen me, and I knew he was trying to scare me. I almost urinated on myself because I felt the wind of that vehicle, and I would be willing to swear to that in court. But at the time, because we had already taken so many complaints that this man does it to others. And at this point, I will point journalists to look at the hashtag Black@WIU. You will see, if they haven't pulled them down, you'll see at least 2 tweets from Black WIU students alleging that an officer sped through a crosswalk with his lights off and almost hit them. And we believe that it's Officer Steiger. This is domestic terrorism. The fact that he's not just done this to Megan to shut her up, you know, when you illegally detain someone, you know you are intentionally choosing to traumatize them. You know that you are making them live in fear of you, and that is a silencing tactic. And the fact that Officer Steiger does it repeatedly is a problem. Now we have some other problematic things at the jail, which we'll go over shortly, but yeah, there's a lot of problems here, and all the assurances that Kurt Barker has given us that things are fine hasn't prevented all these rights violations just in this one call. So Sam, do we have the screenshots of what the officers are saying in the jail about Megan's detainment?
Let me
Andy, we have a conversation between two of the sheriff's deputies where one of them acknowledges, yeah, this shouldn't even be happening. You know, this should have, there's actually a misdemeanor that would have just been a paper notice to appear. We do have a police and fire commission here. It has not been functioning forever. And we got all these through FOIA, and we're going to be filing a lot more, but they have actually withheld a lot of evidence. I'm answering a question that's in our chat right now. Yeah, they definitely want to talk one-on-one. And so what we found, and you know, I tested that complaint procedure when Officer JP McLaughlin made several of us in our group feel unsafe with the way he was speaking about us publicly on his tactical website, and then allowing hateful armed concealed carry owners to denigrate our women. And we put in a complaint, and of course the police were like, nope, he didn't do anything wrong, but they did abuse me during that process. So we know that that is blatantly an abusive process. Now at this point, Essie, Dr. Rutledge, are you still on here right now?
I don't hear her.
Oh, that's right, because we've got the screen share going. Well, so
give me just a sec. I'm gonna try to pull up those videos.
yeah. So at one point there is actually one, and I don't know if he's a jailer or a sheriff's deputy, and we'll have to find that out. But he says to the other person, yeah, there's actually a misdemeanor that this would be better. And I'm going to give a content warning for language on this. But the other officer says, well, yep, I know, but instead we're doing this because he's being a dick, meaning Officer Steiger. There's several other problematic conversations of other officers talking about how Officer Steiger mistreats people like this a lot. They refer to them as, well, you know who we're dealing with though, and that's why they're here. I mean, so this is a culture of silence, right? This is the blue line. This is the blue wall of silence. And so you have presumably good officers noticing that things are wrong, but their leadership clearly has not empowered them to stop the injustice from continuing. And that's a whole nother level of problems, because remember that Ariel Harrison ended up in jail with a head injury, and they never even called any medical for her, and she was unconscious for several hours after Officer Steiger took her into custody, alleging that she was driving drunk, but no evidence for it. And then we have video, but it's really hard to see, but they tased her out of that vehicle 5 times in the back. And she is much smaller than Megan. And so, you know, and of course, blind in one eye. And then she suffered in that jail for over 5 days, I think it was. And of course, she has suffered, you know, for over 1.5 years waiting for her court date, for which they are still trying to charge her with DUI, even though we proved that the allegation, and the chief did lie about that evidence on the record in court. So,
All right. I have that video ready. So were you guys able to see that I swapped to a different tab?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
No problem, Sam. Thank you so much, Sam.
Give it just a second here. He's walking back in after he took Corey out. And I just talked to Megan. And then there's another portion to that. It's just split up.
Sam, we couldn't hear anything on that.
On which one?
Oh, the one that you just played. What did they say?
Oh, he was saying that Gavin's gonna do what Gavin wants, so Steger's gonna do what Steger wants.
Yep.
He didn't explain the situation to her. He didn't see any reason why she should have been charged with misuse of 911, as he saw it as a reasonable thing to do, considering she feared for her life, basically.
Right. A trauma-informed, racially sensitive approach would have revealed easily that that was perfectly understandable, and not only a reasonable request to protect both Megan and Corey, but also that would protect our taxpayers from lawsuits, right? I mean, that's an attempt to make everybody safer, and there's nothing wrong with that.
All right, and then I'm gonna play the rest of this. Hopefully you guys can hear it. I have it up as loud as I can.
Thanks, no problem. Sorry, I just can't hear him at all.
He told her that the night staff would be processing her.
Yeah, and we would like to give a shout out to this good officer. He clearly sees something wrong. He is appropriately responding as far as we can tell. And correct me if I'm wrong in this for sure, but by what I see an officer who's concerned and is wondering how this has happened and is doing his best to try to deal with the situation. But clearly there's no, where's the stop button? We need a stop button for good officers to be able to say, hey, look, this is not right. Instead of letting injustice to continue.
So the last end of this, you're gonna want to try to listen really closely because it is faint. But this is where he says that there could have been a misdemeanor charge instead of a felony charge, and that because of who they're dealing with, speaking of Steger in this instance, that he's just being a dick, and that's the officer's own words. So I'll go ahead and play.
There's no volume. I'm sorry, Sam. Okay.
Yeah, well, he says there's a misdemeanor version of 911. I'll just leave it at that.
And we will load this up onto YouTube. We'll load up these raw. I mean, we have it in the evidence drive as well, so that people can listen to it on their own. But clearly, this officer acknowledges that Steiger has a history of abusing people's rights, locking them up in jail. I mean, this is nothing new to them, and this is certainly nothing new to us. And at this point, we have to ask ourselves, why is it so well known that we have an officer who violates people's rights just to be be a dick?
Well, my question is, why was he named Officer of the Year last year, and how does that reflect on the rest of the department?
Well, right. Yeah, that's a whole nother question. They did that after we held a town hall and a press conference for one of his other victims. And then the city appeared to double down and say, nope, we really like the way Officer Steiger does things, and we're giving him Officer of the Year. And that was perceived and felt and received as a big sort of, FU to his victims by our city. And they need to know that that's the message they are sending by not listening to the multiple concerns of multiple Black families, especially Black women, who have said that they have been mistreated by this man, that their rights were violated, that they were abused and brutalized. Okay, what's next, Sam?
There's just one slide left, and that was just frequently asked questions, so I can put that up.
Okay.
And it was just, was it a legal stop? Was there probable cause for search? Are their guns legal? Did they have legal cause to take Corey and Megan into custody? And what crimes were they charged with?
So the state's attorney sent an email to Megan clarifying that he never had any intent of filing any charges whatsoever. And then she was held for over 20 hours in jail, in our jail, illegally detained overnight, beginning on Corey's birthday, for the crime of having ridden in the passenger seat and then calling 911 when their rights were being violated. Now we'll open it up to Megan and Corey. Megan, would you like to talk a little bit about what happened after you were finally released from there? Did anyone apologize or acknowledge what happened to you as wrong?
No.
No. Go and flip
No.
it back, Sam. I'm gonna,
Oh, yep, sorry.
no problem.
There we go.
So no apology. They had to pay to get their vehicle out. They had to pay, of course, to take time off of work. They had to explain to their employers why they couldn't be at work, which also causes, this is one of the reasons why Black folks, when they are illegally detained, why it often will cost them their jobs. Thankfully, they have employers who know, that they are fine and we're willing to work with them. That is not everybody's, that's just not the way it is for everybody. So at this point, our concerns, we have multiple concerns. One of them is that this Officer Steiger has been acknowledged by several of the Macomb police and the sheriff's deputies in the jail in these recordings that he is a problematic officer who regularly mistreats people, quote, just to be a dick. The fact that they acknowledge that, but there's been no apparent consequences for it, tells me, as somebody concerned with human, civil, and constitutional rights, endangered individuals, that we need the press to investigate this guy. Now, there's another couple elements of here that are really interesting. Officer Steiger, when he did his report, labeled Corey as white, but never asked him what race he was. And we do believe that there is a chance that Officer Steiger may be thwarting the stats a bit by labeling those he racially profiles as white. And this is why this needs to be a federal investigation, because getting the evidence for one stop in McDonough County, if you are stopped here, you have, and let's say that that you're stopped and then they have like the sheriff's, go ahead.
1 second. Now, remember in the beginning of the video when he initially radioed into the police station, he did say, I have a lighter skin, African-American male. But yet he put on the report as a white man.
He did it intentionally. It wasn't a fluke.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, he doesn't get that. And you're right, that right there, that tells me that the other FOIAs we filed in these other cases, we need to go through them, because at this point now that calls into real question the data and how useful it might be for, say, if we looked at all of Officer Steiger's stops over the last 3 years and then we asked, break it down by race, would that be an accurate reflection of the data?
It would not.
Nope.
It would not.
This needs to be investigated. This needs to be a federal investigation. And worse, we know that Officer Steiger, Sam, can you pull up the audio from what those officers were saying to each other while they were hunting them? I don't know if we prepared that clip, but I think it's in the press kit, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
That's the Otter audio, isn't it?
That was from the video, from the dash cam. So,
well, the other thing, evidentiary. So
when they were going over and asking, about the rental vehicle, that's when they were digging for more information. They also, and then at that one point where, the officer said we were going to get them one way or another.
and like that's on its face, just a blatant act of racial profiling.
And they
So
said they were going to take an element of color the whole time. So take that as you will.
now with evidence collection, we think you all should know something. If you are ever pulled over by the police, the first thing that you want to do when you're going to be heading to court is you ask for all of your evidence. What we've discovered is people would only think to go to MPD for that. And then when they get their evidence file, they think they have all of their evidence. That is not the case in our county. You have to file separate request with the Macomb PD, OPS, Office of Public Safety, if it's University Police. You need to also file with the jail for the intake and all of that evidence, and you need to file with 911. So that's at best at least 4 places, right, to file. And a lot of people don't know that. And we do not have, we've not been able to determine whether or not even our public defender's office knows that, because every case that we found, they hadn't ever even looked at the evidence, all of it. So we are trying to make sure that everybody knows that you have to know how to file 4 separate requests. So if you have a police officer with a lot of racial bias, demonstrated racial bias, is known for it, is known for abusing rights, how would you get at that? Well, you would file for that evidence, but unless you're from here and in our org, or you can afford a lawyer who can chase that down, lawyers from out of town, I asked them if they were aware of this just to check, and they're like, are you kidding? No, you ask for your evidence and they have to give you your evidence. Well, not in this county. In this county, they can deprive you of that. So something interesting happened with their evidence. We asked them for Megan's booking videos. We also asked for the evidence of the other dash cams and the evidence of Megan being taken to the jail. And although we were given discs that said that evidence was on there, when we tried to use those discs, there was absolutely no data on there. Maybe it's a clerical error, but these were, remember, these were FOIA'd, right? So a records technician working as a public servant is obligated to follow the standard of the law, right? The best practices standards for doing that, to give us blank discs that had been unchecked to verify multiple blank discs. And it just happened to be all of Megan's stuff, which is why we don't have that for you. So we have to refile for all that, even though she already filed for all this the first time and was given empty discs. And this didn't just happen to her. We got empty discs on some other cases too. So now that calls into question, do they know they're doing this? And if they, or do they not know? If they do know, then what's the motivation behind that? Is it intentional? If it's intentional, why is it being done? Yeah, this courthouse really, our Black community members essentially have no one to count on here. And that's one of the reasons why, we're bringing this to you, because we're concerned that this will continue going on until this officer kills someone. And then everybody will be like, oh yeah, all the cops, we all talked about him. We knew he was like this. I mean, this is how people get hurt. And obviously this couple and their entire family was incredibly traumatized, for which we will, it is our position that this was a bad stop. This was racial profiling. This couple knew they were being hunted, and they actually were being hunted. And the evidence shows that, yes, they were being hunted. And then they were retaliated on for having doing what I, as a white woman, would have done, calling for a supervisor and saying, this is going bad. And I don't know if this officer understands what he's doing wrong, but you need to send a supervisor here because something is not right. If a dispatcher had told me, yeah, you need to stop calling 911 and you don't get to do that, oh my gosh, right? Would they do that to a white person? I don't know, but we do know that they've done it to Black folks. So what we're going to do with this, our next steps of this are, and first off, I'd like to apologize on behalf of our community and on behalf of all of us in our org, to Megan, your family, you, Corey. We are just heartbroken. We're not surprised. this matches the pattern of conduct violations that have been happening to Black folks, in particular Black women, now for, well, going on several years that we've been tracking, and we know it's been going on since forever. But what is different about this case is, of course, they expected you both to be criminals, clearly, and they kept trying to find a reason to turn you into criminals. And they literally tried to threaten you and gaslight you into acting out or losing control of yourselves. And then we have to wonder, why would officers seek to escalate in a situation that already has a lot of problems with it?
Exactly.
There's nothing there that makes anybody safe. They're not making themselves safer. They're not making the public safer doing that. Who are they serving with all this? Who are they protecting with this, right? Officer Steiger is a menace in the society. He has been operating as a domestic terrorist in this situation, literally punishing Black families, whole Black families and Black people for trying to hold police himself accountable. And then everybody helping him with that, needs to be investigated for possible obstruction of justice, because they're admitting that there's rights violations and yet they're doing nothing about it, right? So when we say that there's only one bad apple spoiling a bunch, well, you know what? There's a lot of apples in there that knew that bad apple has been doing bad things. And what have they done about it? Have any of them put in a complaint against them? Any questions or anything that you'd like to add, Megan or Corey, to this?
We just appreciate everybody for being here today and willing to listen to our story and what we went through. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
You're quite welcome. It's our pleasure to help you. When you see people being mistreated, I worked in this community for almost a decade as a paramedic. They'd have never done that kind of behavior in front of me, I don't think. And so the fact that they choose which officers they'll do it with, and they kind of cover for each other, and these same officers, Officer Steiger appears on a lot of complaints. And yet we know that if people tried to file complaints, if they called 911, they might get hung up on, right? Can I ask how your mom and sister are doing right now?
We're all just honestly trying to survive mentally and physically. I think that it has really taken a toll on all of us. I find all of us behaving differently towards another. We're treating each other in a way that we're going to lose each other every day. And that right there is scary, because we once walked around each other with love and open arms and embrace and laughter, and now we constantly worry.
This is racial trauma. This is the aftermath of rights violations. This is what you would see typically, the sequelae of symptoms around people who had been in war or in third world countries where rights are, aren't supposed to exist, don't exist, right? Aren't allowed to. And yet this is Macomb, Illinois. We are home of the largest undergraduate law enforcement program in the country, I believe. And yet this is how to be clear, when our Black community members tell us that they feel hunted by our police in this community, when our Black students repeatedly tell us that the police mistreat them, that they stop them for no reason, that they violate, they may not have the language that, and I want to commend both Corey and Megan. I mean, I thought that your behavior was exemplary. You were trying to get them to cleave to the best practices. You knew that your rights were being violated. You didn't just retaliate on them and start going off on them. You were trying to get them to do what they were supposed to do, and they were not having any of it. And the fact that they will behave that way, even when facing someone who knows their rights are being violated, says a lot about what they believe about what consequences they might face for that, which is that there aren't any. But this Officer Steiger he's a menace. He could have killed people running a stoplight with no lights and sirens. That alone, that should never be happening.
I mean, he's clearly a threat to society and a threat to himself, to all mankind, society, and himself as well. He has no regard for the law. as a law enforcement officer, and he has no regard for human life.
And he couldn't do this without all the white officers who have overlooked his wrongdoing all this time. And without a city government that is absolutely unresponsive to any of these concerns. And we brought up just about every problem that Megan and Corey went through. We have already brought it to the attention of our city and our police with public comments, with speak outs, with town halls. And yet this is still how they got treated. It hasn't fixed a dang thing. And I'm so sorry. So at this point, we'll open it up to the media. What questions do you have?
Okay, Devin Brooks of News 3, thank you.
Go ahead.
So what I want to know, I just have some different questions here. Some of them are just really short. Has there been a complaint filed with the police department?
Not yet. We're working on that. That'll be the next step. But doing this was an attempt because remember, we have proven that the complaint process is abusive. It doesn't adhere to any trauma-informed procedure. There are no controls on it to protect them from being re-traumatized, even submitting the complaint. And what assurance do they have that they're going to get anywhere with submitting a complaint within the internal police department when there's already police officers acknowledging that this officer has violated their rights? But Megan and Corey, go ahead. Would you like to speak to that?
Well, I 100% agree with you, Heather, with what you had to say about the matter. My husband and I, on our behalf, we have not filed any complaints with the police or the city. And a lot of that does kind of circle back around to what Heather has to say. So I do appreciate the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some other ones. I just want to also make sure. So we're recording, so we'll be able to get the recording. Is that right?
Yep. As soon as I get it uploaded, I'll get it up on YouTube.
And thank you all for turning on your camera since we're on TV side. So what about Heather or anybody else? Have you talked to the new chief? I know you were talking to him at Take Back the Night last week, but I didn't know if you had mentioned this case or anything like that.
I did talk to the officer. I did talk to the chief at Take Back the new chief, the interim chief, Jarrell Jones, at the Take Back the Night rally, and I let him know that we were going to be doing a press conference and that we did hope that he would listen with an open heart and that he would really look at the processes that the procedures that went on during this. He would look at the evidence of it and that he would seek to, really try to fix a lot of the structural deficits that led up to this even happening, because the previous chief has shown no willingness. Chief Barker has been absolutely unwilling to do a single fix, to even acknowledge there's anything wrong. And remember, Chief Barker, even after we brought concerns about Officer Steiger in other cases, our city and our chief and our mayor all tripled down on him being a great officer, and they awarded him Officer of the Year despite all that. So what assurance do we have that further conversation is going to do any good whatsoever, other than potentially re-traumatize this family? From our position, we do not have trust in our city leadership at all on this. Not at all. We tried. The only way Mike Inman was willing to even look at this was if I was willing to do a one-on-one private meeting with him in City Hall when nobody else was around. There is no circumstance under which I would do that. And I've already stated publicly why, but also because we do organize around civil and human and constitutional rights, and because that is very traumatizing, we always approach those conversations from a team perspective, because some of us, a lot of us have our own traumas, but also we dissociate, it gets upsetting, we get overwhelmed. And by doing it with a team approach, you have multiple ears listening, you have multiple people thinking, people's different life experiences. And that way we can ensure that we are at least getting whatever details we want in that conversation, so that we don't we never want to put trauma victims through a retelling without there being something good to gain. And in this case, we don't believe that the city is going to do a damn thing about any of this at this point. I do believe, I'm going to give Jarrell Jones the benefit of the doubt. I do believe that he has a good heart. I don't know whether he's aware that his officers behave like this and have for years. His new officers, right? Because he's just stepping into this, and this is not his mess to clean up. This is Chief Barker's mess. He created it. He's allowed it to continue. He's absolutely refused to address any of it whatsoever. Doubled down that he is perfectly okay with the way that his officers behave. I would hope that everyone in the community who travels our roads would be concerned that we have an officer who thinks it's okay to blow through red lights just on a what he calls a routine stop and put human beings at risk. Because remember, one of our officers killed a person doing that very thing in a chase, and ended up, and we are still as taxpayers paying off a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for that wrongful death just a few years ago. And so Chief Barker has no credibility with our org, certainly no credibility with myself. And, you know, our attempts over the last several years to try to get any of this fixed, the complaint process, making sure that they use a trauma-informed process, teaching them to use a racial justice or a racially informed lens when they are doing these stops, making sure that none of that has gotten through, none of it. And while we have had many assurances from other orgs that they're working on these things, our org deals with structural issues and complaints of injustice. And the work that they are doing, having conversations, is not sufficient. This is a federal crime. Megan and her husband, Corey, are crime victims. They had their constitutional rights violated, period. That is a federal investigation that needs to happen. We need the federal authorities to come in, and they need to investigate this department. They need to look at the way that its structures are functioning. Even when good people try to find out how it operates, they thwart any knowledge of that. They just refuse to even tell you. You know, they're not interested in providing any of that. And we know the chief is aware of these problems because we have brought this to their attention. And so it is our hope that we will get enough journalistic sunlight on these problems, because Megan and Corey are not the first Black people who have had their constitutional, civil, and human rights violated by our Macomb PD, our sheriff's department, our jail. But it is our intent to make sure that they are the last. They need to be the last that ever are subjected to this inappropriate, unprofessional, dangerous, offensive, and cruel behavior on behalf of our police. There's no level at which this is acceptable. This was an illegal stop. It was racial profiling. They were being hunted simply for being Black. And then they tried to find a means and they couldn't find a real reason. And then they tried after the fact to justify why they were even taken into custody. To his credit, I will say on this case, not in all the previous ones, but in this case at least, Matt Quacala acknowledged, oh yeah, I don't want to touch that. He just, you know, he told Megan in an email, I never intended to file anything for you. And
I was curious about that. I have a meeting coming up at 3:30, so I want to get through some of these other questions. But what were you all told as to why they didn't issue charges?
Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, Matt Quasala basically let me know that because my husband and I had an exemplary background and that there was nothing on our background, that pretty much he didn't see it being justifiable to pursue any of the allegations or charges.
Okay, so any other past issues with law enforcement in McDonough County, or I guess in police in general? Any past with you all?
No.
Okay.
I have a clean
That's
record.
not really relevant.
The only thing that I had was a speeding ticket, and I took care of that a long time ago.
Okay.
So to answer your question, my husband and I, we have nothing on our background records. That's why we are proud gun owners as well as FOIA card holders. You can't have any type of background barely even misdemeanor to get a FOIA card. So
And that's why he said exemplary background, right?
Right.
yeah, he said that because of the fact that we had a clean background and we had nothing on our background, was exactly what he said, was the reason why he was not going to pursue any charges, his office.
Okay. And then have you all had any kind of police interactions in the past that just, have been wrong, or you just, or is this the first one where you've had a bad time with, interacting with police?
I actually had an altercation one day. I was dropping my wife off at work. We were walking at the time, but I had dropped her off at work, and this happened here in Macomb as well. She worked at Hy-Vee at the time, and I was walking back home. And in the housing area in Macomb, I had noticed a cop was circling around the block. So I intentionally walked across the street to avoid that.
I also want to let you know that he had on his military backpack. So he did have on military equipment, attire. So that was initially probably noticed by the cop at the time that my husband was wearing some type of military attire. So please continue.
And so he approached me. I had headphones on, and this is right around the time that Trayvon Martin had got killed. So back in 2013, 2014. But I had headphones on, and the only reason I heard the car is because the song was changing. And I turned around, and there was the officer standing behind me asking me about a domestic violence case in the housing unit. And I told him I had nothing to do with that.
So my husband was harassed twice previously before this, years back ago. One of the incident is what he's telling you. He was walking, just minding his business, and the cop had told him about a call that he received about a gentleman not matching my husband's description at all. And my husband even stated that to him, that, well, it doesn't match my description. And he still wanted to harass him. I don't really know much about, how that ended, but he wasn't taken into jail or custody or anything like that. And then another time was my husband was still active, and he was stationed out in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And he will often make trips to Macomb, Illinois to see me, which is a 12-hour commute. And one day he planned to come and see me, and it had to be about 3:00 in the morning, being that it is a 12-hour commute from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And he had his military plates and his military sticker on the back of his car. And where I lived in Macomb was very weird to figure out how to navigate to get there. So I just told him to park at the YMCA, and I would come and meet him so we could further navigate to my house. So he did as instructed, and he parked at the YMCA. And maybe 3 minutes later, 2 minutes, I get a phone call from him, and he's in the background. I hear a lot of noise in the background, and he's telling me if I could hurry up and get to the Y, because there are 7 or 8 cops. Some of them are in SUVs, some of them are in cop cars. They're all out with their hands on their holster, their flashlights drawn in his face, blinding him, asking him questions. And so he asked me if I could hurry up and rush and get to the Y. So I rushed to the Y. A few of the officers I knew, I asked them what was their problem. This was my boyfriend. He's military. He was coming in town to visit me. He's not familiar around the area. And since they knew me, they said, well, it's no problem. It's private property. For future reference, just try to remember that it is private property. So after a certain amount of time, technically you're really not supposed to be parked here, but that's no problem. You guys have a good night. So he did have 2 separate issues with the police out here years back ago. But other than that, no. As far as me, I've never had any issues with the police out here. In fact, I went to school with most of them, so I never had really any issues because I knew them all.
Okay. But
Can I
this is
ask,
the
were you
one.
parked in the YMCA lot across the street from the Y?
No, I was actually parked inside the YMCA lot.
Okay. Okay. But
Okay.
still, I've never heard of anybody being questioned about that. People do that all the time, especially when they go to church at night and the church lot's full.
Yeah, and I
Right.
mean there was like eight cops outside, like with their guns ready to be drawn in motion. Like he asked them, he said, "Would you guys remove your flashlights from my eyes? You're blinding me." They knew he was military. They asked him about his service, where he was coming from. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Devin.
Okay. So this is as bad as it's gotten with police.
Yes.
Okay. This case. Okay. Which branch in the military? It's
U.S.
just-
Army.
Okay. Army. And then where are you all from? Are you from Macomb or where?
I'll start off. Originally, I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska. My dad served 25 years in the Air Force, and he's a retired lieutenant colonel. So we moved around a lot. But originally, born in Alaska, I was raised in Montgomery, Alabama, and I went to the service after that.
So his father's a 25-year lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. My husband comes from a well-decorated military family down south. So yeah, he is an Alaskan native. And I have been in the Macomb area since I was a little girl.
So together, how many years would you say here in Macomb?
Together or separate?
Together.
Together, we're reaching 10 years, a decade, I would
Okay.
say, in Macomb.
In Macomb, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Any kids?
Together. No, we thank God, because if I had a child and that happened, I mean, I can't even speculate how I would have reacted. So, but no child, no kids, thank goodness.
Okay. All right. Your ages. How old are you?
I'm 33.
And I'm 32.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the heat was on while you were in the car?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you said the officer said he spotted an air freshener hanging or something. Was that from the window?
Yes, on the rear view mirror, the Pine air fresheners. We had one hanging along with the WIU tag and an Alabama Crimson Tide hat tassel that was also hanging up there as well.
Okay. I guess one of my last questions for you before for Heather or someone else to respond. So why are you all speaking out? We hear a lot of these stories in this community, but you all are brave enough and have the courage to tell your story. Why?
Because
I'll start.
People.
Because I've done a lot in this world through the military, and I've always been taught right is right, wrong is wrong, and you step up when you are wrong, and you make sure that people know that what you're doing is right. When you step up and say something, when something that is just unjust, you shouldn't sit back and be quiet about it. You should want to step up and help out.
As far as me, a lot of people knows my background. I've always been very active and proactive when it comes to inequality, injustice, equal rights, constitutional rights, God-given rights, inalienable, unalienable rights, laws, and everything else of that measure. So I've always been a very outspoken, proactive individual when it comes to human rights in general. And I've always been a person that believes in you're going to stand for something or you're going to fall for anything. And with that saying, I'm a woman of great measures and of great magnitude. And I feel as though that it is important for me and my husband to tell our story, to get this out, because I honestly want to prevent it from happening to my kids, your kids, my sister children, and anybody else's kids or loved ones in the area and surrounding area. So I think it's very important. Right now it's happening in the world, and there are people who are talking about it and coming out in the world. But there are, all too often do I see little, if any, body around the area willing and brave enough and open enough to speak about this. And so I think it's very important as a Black woman and also a member of the Black community that this is something that is problematic, it is troublesome, and it does need to be have attention brought to it.
And then before I ask this last question, which I forgot to, Heather, can you look at the video that Chief Jones, he just put it out probably a couple hours ago about on the Macomb Police Department's Facebook, and just a response to that. It's basically talking about how he plans to lead the department, but it's a coincidence that it came out right around this time, right? So
it's no coincidence. I had a conversation this morning, largely because I reached out to Officer Hamer and let him know that we were going to be holding this press conference and that we expected to see this officer immediately suspended, taken off the street, because he is a danger. He represents a danger and a threat, and that we expected them to properly investigate, and if there was any retaliation that they could expect, blowback. But I also wanted to inform them that we were going to be announcing an action, and that I would be having a conversation with them about our expectations about how the police should treat people during this action, because the way that they responded, not all of them, right? I mean, Officer Hamer was okay, but generally a lot of the officers have, not been good at protest. And so I suspect that they prepared that preemptively to try to help the community, understand what has happened. And I would expect that, I don't have a problem with Chief Jarrell Jones doing that, but okay, now somebody has sent that to me.
I'm Jarrell Jones, acting chief of police for the city of Macomb Police Department.
as you're watching that, I just have this other question. So can we clarify the driver's license situation?
Yes. I actually went last year in July to take the driver's license test. I passed it. I signed it, and I never received a hard copy from the DMV.
July of 2020.
Yes, July 22nd of 2020. I had to go all the way to Carthage because the DMV in Macomb was closed.
Funny story about this. When this happened and we were made aware that there were issues with my husband's license, we went to the Macomb DMV, and the same lady who assisted my husband with his license in Carthage was there in Macomb and said, wait, what's going on? I remember you coming to our facility in Carthage and giving you the test and you passing. So I will have to locate this lady, of course, and figure out her name. But yeah, so my husband, so just to clarify the license, my husband had his license then. He produced it to the cops. They were not willing to look at it. When he got into the station, he even produced it to them. They saw it, looked at it, and said, that's weird. We see that you have a license right here, and it's showing us you're showing us you have a license, but when we look you up in the system, it tells us you've never had a license in the state of Illinois. So they saw a hard copy or a copy of his license, a paper copy, the temporary copy that they give you before sending out the hard copy. So they saw the temporary paper copy, and it had the date on there. It had the state that issued it, the date that it was issued, the date of expiration, and they all agreed that that was valid. But then they also said, this is weird. We've never seen anything like this before, because when we looked your name up in the system, it tells us you've never had a license in the state of Illinois. So it was acknowledged that he had his license once he got to the police station. However, they just did not acknowledge it.
You had the temporary copy was in the car at the time.
And it doesn't matter, it's still a valid license.
And you were going to get the license. You were trying to go and get the license, right? When you
No, my husband
Well,
had his
no.
license. So we weren't underneath any impression that there was any issues with his license.
Yes.
Because he had his license. They told us that they would mail out the hard copy. And because it's a pandemic and everything's been closing down left and right and then opening back up, we just figured we're waiting for his license in the mail, the hard copy.
Devin, were you talking about when she was going to the car?
That's what I'm talking about. When
Oh,
you
oh, yes. Yes.
over to the passenger
Sorry.
side.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes. Yes, she was going to get a
Yeah.
copy of the license.
When I was headed to the passenger side, I was going to reach into my purse to grab his license because I realized they were trying to detain him for not having a valid license, in which he did have a valid driver's license. And so that's what I was going to obtain.
Okay. That's what I wanted to check. That's all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The video, and I'll give a response to that. Citing the 10 shared principles, we watched when the Chief Barker and the mayor and all them signed those, and those are laudable goals and fine. But he also talks about that his police are honest, open, and transparent. We have evidence that is anything but true. There may be a few officers like that, but this tells me that Interim Chief Jones does not know a lot of his officers very well at all, and has not reviewed any of the evidence of the cases that we've brought already, that already demonstrate clearly that MPD uses inappropriate tactics against our own community members, uses inappropriate tactics against those of us who try to bring concerns to their attention. Interim Chief Jones is stepping into a mess. His talk of unity, what does he call? He asked for patience and support. How much more support do our police need? We have a lot of people who need support, and that needs to come in the form of investigations of these officers that have done wrongdoing. We will not, for the Racial Justice Coalition, we are not going to be about spiritual bypassing. We are not going to accept any of this coming together or patience when there are officers we know who literally are violating the law and putting lives at risk. They must be taken off the streets, period. They must be investigated and held accountable to the highest extent of the law. We need the feds to come in and tear apart MPD and look at how these officers have been behaving over years, because we have dozens of Black folks who have had their rights violated, many of whom now carry the stigma of having been found guilty for manufactured crimes or for over-policing or racial profiling, for things for which we know white community members would never suffer. And it doesn't just impact their lives, it impoverishes their children. It destroys their ability to take care of their families. It harms their mental health. And none of that was in on this, he released a PR puff piece that is laudable goals for the department and asking for a coming together. And that would be great in a normal scenario. This is not at all a normal scenario. This officer acts as a white domestic terrorist in our community, literally hunting Black folks. And we believe that he is at least partially responsible for many cases of rights violations, which have caused our, Black folks to flee this community, the ones here living here to suffer maltreatment, mental health issues, abuse secondary to their abuse and their rights violations. I think, we will be happy to work with Interim Chief Jones and his position, but to be clear, we have an ask list that MPD and the city of Macomb and the county, and remember the jail, that has never even been given any kind of awareness, other than we commend County Board Member Mike Kirby for trying, Alderwoman Tammy Lee Brown Edwards. That's the full list of people who have expressed any interest whatsoever in any of the evidence in all these multiple cases. All the rest didn't want to know, had no interest, and didn't want to see it. They've never called us up to ask. They've never reached out to any of these victims. They've never sought to make this right. This has to be made right. Before there's a coming together, before there's a spiritual bypassing of let's all just rise above and get along, that would be another institutional and cultural injustice to all the victims of these disgraceful, despicable officers who have violated rights. Steiger needs to be off the street today. Next, this Saturday, we will be having a speak out in the park in Chandler Park. And then it is our intent to march to the police station, and we will be protesting the Macomb police station, demanding a full investigation that Officer Steiger be taken off these streets so he can never hurt anyone again. He can never put a family through this again. We want 911, that 911 dispatcher, to be taken off duty, to be evaluated. And really, she should lose her job. She should lose her job. She leveraged a racial injustice likely to cause PTSD and ongoing problems with the Megan and Corey's family that they didn't have to have as a part of this. They already have intergenerational racial trauma. They didn't need this on top of that. It could have been avoided with a little bit of professionalism. So this whole idea that we treat people with respect, I don't know what department Jarrell Jones is talking about, but he's not talking about the Macomb PD that we know. He may be talking about a few officers, but we have some officers that are a threat, have hurt people, are hurting people, and represent a danger to this entire community. And it represents a threat to his officers. I don't doubt that he will be willing to have any conversation. He strikes me as someone who's in earnest. I do believe him when he says he wants to fix things. We are going to work towards that. But in the interim, we absolutely intend on standing with the victims of our police until those bad officers are gone, are held accountable. We make sure they never are allowed to harm somebody wearing a badge and gun and the power of authority and life and death over our most vulnerable, most underrepresented, and least represented people in our government here, locally and everywhere.
And what do you have to say to de-escalation tactics and training? Because that was not used here.
That was not used here at all.
It clearly
It
could
wasn't.
have been, and it shouldn't have gotten to that point, even, calling 911.
Right.
But what do you have to say on that, Dan?
I say that officer better be off the street tonight. He better be on a desk. His service revolver had better be taken away from him. And we're going to encourage everybody to call the police and make sure that this happens. This man should not have the power over anyone, any living being. He clearly has a lot of bias. He has a lot of problems with making decisions. He does not attend to the sanctity of life at all. Putting people at risk for a routine stop, thwarting the paperwork. At one point, you can see clearly that he turns off the recording so that we can't hear and the normal evidence collection would not catch that he is literally working with other officers to hunt Megan and Corey as they go about driving around. That right there is not community policing. That is what we would call warrior prey or warrior combatant mentality. And the fact that he turned on what we call hype music, I will tell you as a former paramedic, when you turn on the lights and sirens, that is already giving you an adrenaline rush. And you have to really work hard at de-escalating yourself internally because you do not want that to affect your interactions or your judgment. You need to be absolutely clear-headed when you get out of your vehicle and approaching that to attend to risk, to attend to safety, to attend to de-escalation, to making sure that you are appropriately assigning resources, attending to rights. None of that was happening in this. This shows that the Macomb PD structure has so many problems that really they should take down that 10 shared principles because they are not abiding by it. And it's a disgrace to claim that they care about it at this point. I believe that Interim Chief Jones cares about it. I believe they have some good officers who care about it. But has that been able to, can that even be put into action when you have an officer who's racist and dangerous and hurtful and cruel? No.
And I also want to state for the record that this individual needs to be definitely suspended or removed immediately. My husband and I, we were in town on Friday, and we actually saw that same civil servant Steiger pass us Friday, and instantly the emotion that bestowed me, that overcame me, was I mean, there's no words for it to describe it. So right now, as long as a person of his stature is still roaming the streets, I do not feel safe. I already don't feel safe with law enforcement, but to have experienced what I've experienced with this person, knowingly that he's still driving around the same areas in which he just violated my rights, looking to continuously infringe and violate people's rights, and maybe mine again, that's problematic for me and concerning. And I'm also feared that he can easily take my life.
And remember, he almost ran me down in the crosswalk. I have direct evidence that this man is really problematic. When we have tried to interact with him and he has been the reporting officer, he can't look me in the eye. Now, I will tell you at the Take Back the Night, I'll give you an instance of what happened. At the Take Back the Night incident the other night, we watched an attempted murder that occurred right in front of us. And Sam can verify this, and Sam's spouse can as well. And we watched a red sedan try literally swerve and step on the gas and try to run down a black woman, two young women, but one of them was clearly black. And they screamed and ran out of the way, and we checked on them, but they said, no, the police won't help us. You know, we don't trust the police, so please don't report it. And of course, we get that. And remember, I've received absolutely no help for all the police who have mistreated me and the women in our org. There's just been sort of a nod and a laugh and all that. And that's great. We're clearly the people they don't care about, don't want to trust, don't want to protect. And worse, the fact that we have a police chief who has been repeatedly using racist language, a false quote of Nelson Mandela in his signature line, has posted blatantly racist comments, said blatantly racist things, and this city has doubled down in their support of that. There's not going to, no, 10 shared principles, they're following that for white people, right? And not all white people. But our Black folks, we believe them. We believe they've suffered harm. We believe they remain in danger. This guy is a danger. He needs to be gone. The department needs to be investigated. It needs to be transparently investigated. We need a civilian oversight review board. It needs to be independent. It needs to have marginalized people on it who have suffered these injustices and know where to go looking for the problems.
We know that some of this training is not effective because the whole department was trained in anti-bias police in September. So,
right.
Yeah, that obviously didn't work, did it?
Right. There we go. So, okay. Thank you all. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate you.
Yes,
so much
thank you
for being here.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it. This will be loaded up on our YouTube channel as soon as I can. Anyone else have questions?
I sent you a couple of questions. I had sent one to Megan because my recording time is actually up. I don't have any more recording time left. So what I was trying to find out is if anything had happened, perhaps this was said and I missed it, about whether or not they had reimbursed or in any way offered to compensate for the money that was lost by the Kellys as they had to get their vehicle out of impound and as they bailed Corey out and any other charges. Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Michelle. And well, nothing was offered to us. Nothing was made inference on, given back to us. We will give this to you guys. None of that. I actually had to advocate on my own behalf to try to collect back some of the money that I did spend in this matter. And so doing that, I did receive a refund for Corey's bond. However, it was not the total amount that I paid for his bond. So I do have to inquire about that. When I received that the refund check for it, it was in my PO box, in which I had never provided that information to any city officials or law enforcement. So I was curious as to how they obtained that information absent of me, and also, you know, how they got that information to refund partial or some of my money back to me. And I was also curious as to why the full payment of my money wasn't refunded and why I was not informed that I was going to be receiving a refund. So nobody made me aware. So a day that my husband and I was in town, we decided to check our PO box. And when we checked our PO box, we realized that we had a refund payment in there from the city of Macomb. However, we were not informed that we were receiving a refund payment. Made aware, we did not provide any information about our PO box. So yeah, so we did receive a payment from the city of Macomb for Corey's bond. However, it was not the total amount, and the way that we received it is in question.
Okay, so did you receive anything for the impoundment of your vehicle?
No, we have not received anything.
Okay, because that, from what I understand, that was quite hefty. As I recall, it was somewhere around in the $700 some odd range.
Correct. It was 710. Was it, Corey? It was $710 for the impound.
Yeah, I think I noticed $280 for the booking charges, which would bring
Correct.
you to, with the combined with the vehicle impound, I think that brings you to literally $990, if memory serves me correctly.
Yes,
Okay.
$1,000 in a matter of less than an hour. Correct.
It sounds like, yeah, $990 is pretty darn close. It's within spitting distance.
For nothing. For nothing.
Right, and I mean that in and of itself to me is kind of it's a very interesting and disturbing facet of your story, along with a lot of other facets which you already discussed in our interview. So I appreciate your time for that. I am still writing, and because there's so many fine details, and I haven't even gotten to through the whole arrest yet in the write-up itself, because I was so honestly I was rather surprised by the fact that the officer, when I looked at the video, that he actually blew the red light. I think that kind of stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
About the situation. Yeah. So it kind of made me look and reevaluate the entire video over again a couple of times as well. So I'm trying to get things down correctly, because I know there were some discrepancies between your account and what I was seeing on the video, and I didn't want to jump to any conclusions. I wanted to try to let the evidence speak for itself. So
if I could jump in there, just for people listening, with trauma, when people are enduring trauma and they feel that their lives and health and safety are at risk, then the timekeeper in their brains becomes disengaged because it's deprioritized by the limbic system, largely because the brain is saying, you know what, the future doesn't matter right now, let's just get to safety. And so you'll find during interviews with trauma victims that often you do have a lot of time discrepancies. They dissociate off details, but then remember them later, but then maybe can't recall them when they're too upsetting. And all of that is the sequelae of trauma that we find in trauma victims, and all understandable, certainly.
There was one thing I wanted to point out, and I don't know if Megan remembers this or not. When you were being booked, Megan, I believe I recall you started to give a PO box and they cut you off, so you were not able to give them the full address. They said they needed a physical address.
You're right about that. I did proceed to give a PO box, and yes, you are right.
But I'm pretty sure she cut you off as you were trying to tell her.
She did. She told me that would not work and that they had to have a physical address on file.
But still, that would beg the question of how did they get the rest of that PO box address?
Yes, that's very true.
Anything else, Michelle?
the other question I had is when is your March going to be? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it if it's today.
Not today.
Okay.
We need time to rest. We need to get this, loaded up to YouTube.
Mhm.
And we're going to be helping them file complaints with several agencies. After they have sufficient time to rest and recover and begin to feel better. But then this Saturday, we're going to be at the park, and we're not going to get a permit for it because we're going to be practicing our First Amendment rights. And we are going to be meeting at noon there and start with a speak out, but then we are going to be going to marching to the police station and demanding an investigation of all of these, this entire case, but also tomorrow, Ariel Harrison, another of Steiger's, victims, and we're going to call her that. She's one of his victims, and she is being railroaded to jail on ostensibly a DUI that they didn't even test for DUI, and yet kept her in jail for 5 days, allegedly for 2 shots of Fireball whiskey. And she emerged from that jail with a head injury, 5 taser marks in her, for 2 Fireball shots of whiskey. Would that happen to a white woman here? No. No. So we want the eyes of this community to really look at, people ask me, oh, do you think that these officers are just racist and intend on doing this? What I've learned about implicit and explicit bias is that often it's because somebody has not been challenged to have deeper cognitive interactions with their own biases in a way that helps teach them that those biases are actually shaping their worldview. A police officer who has such a biases at play is a menace. A gun in their hand is a danger to everybody. It's a danger to all the other officers. The fact that none of these problems have even been acknowledged that they're problems. I mean, where's Chief Barker's acknowledgement that any of his officers ever do any wrong?
Where's his acknowledgement that he ever does anything wrong?
Yeah. So it is our intention to, we will be launching an action. It will be a peaceful action, but we do expect the police to take action to remove these people from the street, to bring in federal investigators. We want a federal investigation. We need the feds to come in and look at the policies and procedures and ensure that there is adequate transparency, oversight, all those things that our new chief says that he believes in, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the credit, for that. Okay, I believe that he believes in those. Not all of his officers do. And a lot of his officers are just plain dangerous and awful, and repetitively. And the fact that now, after this attempted murder happened, I did talk to Jarrell Jones about it because he came up to me at the Take Back the Night, and he clearly wanted to start a conversation, and I'm deeply appreciative because that's more than I ever got from Barker. Barker has never shown 1 ounce of interest in anything that we have to bring or say or are concerned about. He's blown off literally at all these concerns about rights violations. Same with our sheriff. And our sheriff, we know that the chief knows the sheriff intimidates people and refuse to do anything about it. They're okay with this. This is the message that whether Macomb's leadership wants to be sending this message or not, we really need our white community to hear this. When we bring concerns and Black folks bring their own concerns that their rights have been violated, that they've been mistreated, that they've been brutalized, that they've been economically harmed, that they live in fear, that they have trauma and mental health issues from PTSD because of the way they've been treated by the people we pay with our tax dollars to, quote, serve and protect them. Where do you go with that, right? Because there's a divide there. We need our white community to understand that when our white leaders are calling for rise above, we're all just one happy family, let's all come together, that is what you would call spiritual bypassing. And it is a form of victim it's basically a form of victim silencing by people in power. It is a form of oppression. That is a tool. It's a systemic tool of oppression at work in this community that thwarts good white community members from realizing how bad some things are here, that there are people capable on our police force of murdering Black folks. If they will lock Black people up just for nothing, and they will harm them and be escalating themselves and each other on calls, that represents a real risk and danger that must be investigated. It must be mitigated. It must be dismantled. The structures that have allowed that to even begin here, to be perpetuated, to continue. There's not been any discussion about any of that. And we still don't even have a trauma-informed complaint procedure. If there was truly good faith behind all of these empty promises from Mayor Inman and the city council, not Tammy Lee, because she has always reached out to us, wanted to know what the facts were, and then reached out to the families of these people and asked, what can I do? She's not getting the support that she deserves and needs. And she's the one who knows better than everybody else up there with all the white city council people that problems are pervasive. And if people don't want to care about the Black folks being harmed, okay, Macomb white community, care about this. Care about our economic base, because we can't afford a lot more multi-million-dollar lawsuits against our police for screwing up on the job. And we're already paying out more than enough. And from our perspective in the Racial Justice Coalition, the Democratic Women of McDonough County, we don't like conflict. That people may think that we do, but we see danger, we see harm. This is hurting our members. Megan and Corey belong to us. They're our community. When this is allowed to happen to them and our community just blows it off and doesn't respond, what message to our Black community, to our students, to the taxpayers who send all those funds to this region for our institution of higher ed, what message do they think we're sending if we ignore this problem? This is a problem. There's threat, there's danger. It's not been mitigated. If anything, it's even getting worse. Changing out who's at the top. This is Barker's mess, but now they've appointed a Black man who's going to have to sit there and apologize for all of this. And that right there, that's spiritual bypassing right there, and it's unfair to Chief Jones. And I'm sorry for that, this mess he's inherited. And he's going to have a real task ahead of him. And I do not have any evidence whatsoever that Mayor Inman, the affirmative action officer, Scott Coker, has never asked a single question about any case we've brought up in the last year and a half. Not a single question. And he sits as the VP over 2 orgs that say that they care about these issues. But our concern is that he's going to be encouraging victims who suffer racial injustice to these outside orgs that he sits on in leadership of. But from our perspective, what that does do is it thwarts the public record. It thwarts transparency. It basically decouples victims from an established legislatively enabled process that is already supposed to be transparent, that we can get to, and encouraging them to go to these side conversations, side groups that you can't get at with FOIAs. You can't change out their leadership. You can't ask them to do. You have no idea if they are even informing people of all the rights they have that have been violated and how they can go about sending complaints in to try to get restorative justice. Like there is, to be clear, there's nothing that's going to make what happened to Megan and Corey okay. Nothing will restore what has been stolen from their family by our police officers and our jail and our community. Nothing is going to undo the trauma of Corey's birthday having been spent wondering if his wife's going to be murdered in front of him. These are the things that white people can just ignore. We could just live our lives. Hey, he has no home here, right? But from our perspective, it's our members suffering these injustices. These are our friends. These are our neighbors. These are people who work in our community. We're happy to have them here. We want them to be here in this community. We don't want them to feel unsafe. We don't want them to feel like they're not safe even shopping at our stores. But what do people think this does to our economic base to allow this to continue unmitigated without even acknowledging the harm? So that's what we need to do. We need to talk about these things. And then on the other side of these discussions, it'll be hard, it'll be passionate, it'll be scary, frustrating. People will understand that a lot of things have happened here that should never be happening. And there will be shame involved, I'm sure, and maybe all of us white people deserve to feel a little bit of shame for our complicity and silence. But at this juncture of where we sit in this nation, every community needs to be paying attention to this stuff and believing Black folks. We begin our interactions with people who bring us complaints by believing. And to be clear, it was a community member who brought us this complaint from Megan and Corey. And why would they have any reason to trust someone who looks like me, given the way that they've been treated, right? So I would like to thank them for, it's an honor to work with them. I'd like to thank Corey for his service and Megan for supporting him in that. I'd like to apologize to their families for how this has gone down. Not everybody in our community thinks that this is okay and just fine. We will not settle for a coming together and unity. We want a full accounting of harms done. We want people investigated. We want them held accountable to the highest extent of the law. We want leadership change. We want structural changes. And that's what we're going to work towards.
Thank you so much, Heather. We really appreciate what you and the organization has done for me and my family, and just the work ahead. We look forward to working with you guys, and we are very appreciative. Thank you guys, and thank you everybody for listening in today. We appreciate the questions and the concern, and we look forward to hoping to do more good within our community.
Thank you so much, everybody. Again, my name is Heather McMeekin, and this was the Racial Justice Coalition of the Democratic Women of McDonough County's press conference for the Corey and Megan Kelly case of racial profiling. And really, we are calling what Officer Steiger did white domestic terrorism. If you look at the domestic terrorism statute, him doing this to Black folks all over town, that needs to be investigated as domestic terrorism. That's what you would expect it to look like. And it is on them to prove it's not that. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good afternoon. This will be up on YouTube as soon as we can get it up there. Yeah.